Welcome, everybody, to the City Planning Review Session. Before we begin, I think you all got in your packages a draft letter that we discussed 2 weeks ago from Anita that we will be sending out with your blessing in the next day or so, but I think it accurately reflects the conversation that we had. And with that, Madam Secretary, please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Monday, January 30th, 2017. This is a City Planning Commission review session, and a quorum is present. The first item on the agenda involves proposed zoning map and zoning text amendments, urban renewal plan designation, acquisition and disposition of property to facilitate the proposed downtown for Rockaway development plan. Our presenters include John Young, who's the director of the Queen's Office, as well as Brendan Pilar, who's our lead project manager. Mr. Chairman, would you like to?
Yes, I just would like to note that this is the second of our neighborhood plans to come before us for certification. And as with East New York before it and many others to follow after it, this is a multi-agency comprehensive look at the neighborhood of Far Rockaway and downtown Far Rockaway. And we here at City Planning, and speaking on behalf of the staff of City Planning, are really very happy to be playing a role in this. Unlike East New York, this is an endeavor that has been led by the Economic Development Corporation, but as with East New York and as with the others that will follow this has really been, and I think really a hallmark of all these neighborhood plans, a true multi-agency endeavor. And it involves, among other things, economic development, the creation of a new urban renewal area by HPD. It recognizes that transportation is a very important element of this, including an anticipated new ferry service as part of the city's 5-borough ferry initiative, which is also being managed by EDC. It's a reflection, I think, of the challenges posed by Sandy, particularly in Far Rockaway, and a recognition of that as well. And I also want to say at the outset that this has been a highly cooperative enterprise with the local council member, Donovan Richards, who has been really a leader in the effort to take a hard look at an area that has long suffered for many, many decades, as has East New York, and an area that has been largely ignored, like East New York, by successive administrations going back many decades. So I'm really proud of the work that the city has done here, and with that introduction, I turn it over to the project team start by our Queensborough Director, John Young. John.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm also very pleased to be here with Brendan to have this opportunity to achieve this important launch of the public review of this proposal at Chair Weisbrod's last review session with the Commission. What?
I say.
As he said, we feel this has really been an important interagency
but
effort.
not the last time I will be with you all.
And I just want to take a moment before Brendan has the tougher job of presenting the whole complex proposal, of just thanking some of the groups who participated in this effort. I really want to put them into three groups. First, I want to thank Mayor de Blasio, Deputy Mayor Shores, Deputy Mayor Glenn, and the whole city leadership who have decided to focus resources and attention on Far Rockaway. We think that this is something that this area has needed for some time. And really, through their efforts, we really now have created this creative, flexible, and really, I think, imaginative interagency team. So the next group I want to thank are just the members of that interagency team. As said, this initiative has been led by EDC. It also includes great work by HPD, the Department of Transportation, Department of Parks and Recreation, Department of Environmental Protection, and Small Business Services. Those really have been the core agencies to bring the fruit of our labors to you today. And then the third, and I really would say the most important group I want to thank, is the community of Far Rockaway. The community has certainly given us their input in really thoughtful manners through about a year of community engagement, which we'll describe. And we really want to thank them for taking the time to come to our engagement events, participate in this outreach. And I really want to thank them also just for not only that input, but just for their overall resilience. As Chair Weisbrod has said, parts of Far Rockaway, not necessarily in the downtown, but in some of the residential communities, were hard hit by Sandy. But I think their resilience is really broader than that. Their resilience really is about doing whatever they can to create a better community for themselves, whether it's been through creating new faith organizations, other community resources, and they really have done that in what they feel has been a period of extended neglect by the city. And this is really an opportunity for the city to do something meaningful, purposeful, and I think they're going to really come out again in the public review process, give us some more thoughtful input. But I think the impact of what we've launched here has really touched them, has really touched Councilmember Richards, I know, and has really been important to saying that your community is important to the city of New York. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brendan.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, good afternoon. This is an exciting day for the Rockaways and for me as well. I've been the department's planner for the Rockaways for a very long time, long enough to see nearly every neighborhood have its zoning updated to provide a framework for its orderly growth, and now downtown Far Rockaway is getting its turn. As you'll see, downtown Far Rockaway needs a lot more than just zoning changes to achieve this goal, but the interagency team that has been tasked with transforming the area into a transit and a commercial hub of the Rockaway Peninsula is really utilizing all of the tools it has available to enable the area to realize its potential. The city has undertaken a community-based planning process to shape the future of downtown Far Rockaway in order to increase housing and economic opportunity and improve the quality of life for its residents. The objectives of this effort include activating long underutilized sites with resilient, transit-oriented development to revitalize the historic village of the Rockaway Peninsula, to the creation of new mixed-income housing, strengthening commercial corridors, and improved amenities and services for existing residents. I will touch on all of the bullets on this slide during my presentation, but it's important to note that the city's planning efforts in Far Rockaway were really galvanized by the need for interagency coordination and investment in the Rockaways in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy. And the mayor has doubled down on this commitment. During his 2015 and 2016 State of the City addresses, he announced that the city would seek to transform the area's vacant and underutilized lots to support neighborhood vibrancy and invest $91 million to transform downtown Far Rockaway in particular, the kind of investment that this neighborhood has not seen in years. The city's efforts are being led by the Economic Development Corporation, acting on the behalf of the Office for the Deputy Mayor of Economic Development, with the Department of Housing Preservation and Development and the Department of Citywide Administrative Services. The proposed actions seek to create a new targeted urban renewal area and plan and acquire and dispose of property within such an area, an amendment to the zoning map, zoning text amendments to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area and the special downtown Far Rockaway district within the rezoning area, and the disposition of current city-owned property. Together, the proposed actions would support downtown Far Rockaway's growth and vitality by fostering a vibrant mix of retail, residential, and community facility uses on vacant and underutilized sites near mass transit resources and along the area's primary corridors. The proposed actions are part of a series of strategies that were developed in close consultation with area stakeholders over the past year to work in unison to improve the quality of life within the neighborhood. Far Rockaway is a neighborhood in the easternmost section of the Rockaway Peninsula in Queens Community District 14. It is one of several neighborhoods on the 11-mile-long Barrier Peninsula, which averages less than 3/4 of a mile in width. The entire peninsula has an approximate year-round population of 117,000 residents. The Rockaways is a very unique area, as you've heard me speak before. It is the city's only oceanfront and legal surfing beach, which attracts millions of visitors each year. And while the beach and the Rockaway's famed boardwalk link nearly all of the peninsula's neighborhoods together, there is a stark contrast in the socioeconomic profiles of its eastern and western ends. The western end of the peninsula, largely from Rockaway Beach out to Breezy Point, contains roughly 30,000 year-round residents. 87% are white, and the local area median income of this area is about $75,000. The eastern end of the peninsula, again from Rockaway Beach to Far Rockaway and the Nassau County border, is much denser, nearly 3 times the population of the western end, 90,000 year-round residents. 80% are Black or Hispanic, and the local area median income in this portion of the peninsula is $39,000. As we zoom closer in on the eastern end of the peninsula, you can see how downtown Far Rockaway is located within the larger neighborhood of Far Rockaway. The downtown core is located at the terminus of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority's A train and the terminus of the Far Rockaway branch of the Long Island Railroad, and within walking distance of both Jamaica Bay and Rockaway's famed boardwalk along the Atlantic Ocean beachfront. Although downtown Far Rockaway presents an opportunity for transit-oriented development, its revitalization has been hindered by geographic isolation, competition from nearby suburban shopping centers in Nassau County, and long underutilized properties which dominate much of the area's landscape today. The proposed actions would concentrate new mixed-use development in one of the few areas on the Rockaway Peninsula located outside of the floodplain. What I'm showing here in blue is the FEMA's latest flood map and the extent of the 100-year floodplain. It would also concentrate this development close to the peninsula's largest employer, which is St. John's Episcopal Hospital. The area's relationship with the waterfront and transit is closely tied to its cyclical history of boom and bust. During the early to mid-19th century, seaside hotels and summertime residences were developed in Far Rockaway by wealthy New Yorkers following the construction of the Rockaway Turnpike and the establishment of a ferry service. The resort area was made even more accessible in the mid-1880s with the construction of a trestle across Jamaica Bay that carried the Long Island Railroad to Far Rockaway. In 1888, Far Rockaway had grown large enough to declare itself a village. That distinction would last just 10 years when it was absorbed into the borough of Queens and then consolidated into the city of New York. During the early to mid-20th century, Far Rockaway continued to grow due to improvements to the transportation network, but still maintained its village character. The population was sufficient enough to support the development of entertainment venues, banks, a post office, a newspaper publisher, a hospital, and a police station in the downtown area. After World War II, the increased use of automobiles in the very same roadways and public works improvements that made Far Rockaway accessible for recreation during the first half of the century now provided easy access to other newer waterfront destinations like nearby Jones Beach in Nassau County. By mid-century, the seasonal nature of the area waned. Large apartment complexes like Wave Crest Gardens near Beach 20th Street were constructed for returning GIs, but post-war suburban residential development in Nassau County was a stronger draw for many of Far Rockaway's middle-class residents, which left much of the bungalow areas vacant and in disrepair or converted into rental housing. The Housing Act of 1949 paved the way for Robert Moses's Rockaway Improvement Plan, which raised bungalow colonies in favor of high-rise public housing buildings, concentrating thousands of public housing units in the Rockaways and leaving large swaths of land vacant for decades. In the 1950s, the at-grade train was severed to eliminate at-grade crossings, with the western portion converted into an elevated subway terminating at Mott Avenue and the eastern portion terminating at the present-day Far Rockaway Long Island Branch Station on Namiok Avenue. The Far Rockaway Shopping Center was built in the former right-of-way and now separates the A train from the Long Island Railroad Station. The 80,000 square foot shopping center was once home to a supermarket, a paint store, a furniture store, an eye doctor, a florist, clothing stores, and several other businesses. Today it only has 5 active businesses and stands as a symbol of the area's decline. Over the past decade, however, the Rockaway Peninsula has been the beneficiary of extensive government support, a sharp drop in crime rates, the development of its newest neighborhood, Auburn by the Sea, and refurbished subway stations have driven a resurgence in population and tourism. After Hurricane Sandy struck the area in 2002, the city initiated an interagency effort to mobilize and coordinate city projects and investments on the Rockaway Peninsula. Following this effort, in the February 2015 State of the City address, Mayor de Blasio announced a commitment to the revitalization of the Rockaway Peninsula by activating long underutilized sites. The city looked across the peninsula at opportunities to support neighborhood growth and focused on reestablishing downtown Far Rockaway as the peninsula's commercial hub due to its higher elevation above sea level and good access to mass transit. Today, downtown Far Rockaway is anchored by the Mott Avenue, Central Avenue, and Beach 20th Street corridors, which today are generally comprised of a mix of low and mid-rise buildings containing a mix of local retail, office, and community facility uses. There are actually very few people who live in the project area that I'm showing on the screen outlined in yellow today. Fewer than 900 people live in the core of downtown Far Rockaway, which has really affected the success of local businesses and the variety of retail that we'll talk about in a minute. The shopping center site sits in the middle of downtown Far Rockaway and today forms a super block which interrupts the street grid and blocks a direct connection between the A train and the Long Island Railroad terminals. The downtown core faces many challenges, including large vacant and underutilized sites, a lack of community services, amenities, and housing options, and quality open space for residents and visitors. Key city and privately owned sites near the area's transit resources along its major corridors are significantly underutilized today. The downtown lacks a true center with lively gathering spaces and civic spaces and clear points of arrival. And the shopping center site creates a physical barrier between the area's transit resources and again interrupts an already very complicated street grid in downtown Far Rockaway. For the next few slides, I'm just going to take you on a quick tour of the area. I'd be happy to work with the interagency team to organize a City Planning Commission tour of the downtown area, but for now I hope a virtual tour will do. Starting as you leave the A-train station, you exit the A-train station onto Mott Avenue. And the very first thing that you see is Mott Avenue and the Far Rockaway Shopping Center site. And there is no direct way, there's no crosswalk today to walk from the train station into the shopping center. But once you even make it into the shopping center, there's just not much there today. The large surface parking lot sits largely vacant because the 80,000 square feet of shopping center is itself largely vacant today with, as I mentioned, only 5 active businesses, including a supermarket and a dry cleaning operation. Moving north, again, at the northern end of the shopping center site to where the Long Island Railroad's Far Rockaway branch station is, similarly is also welcoming people leaving the A-train station, with the rear of the shopping center, which is largely a vacant lot, as well as vacant and underutilized former light industrial buildings, including this building directly west of the Long Island Railroad transit station today. Now, Far Rockaway does have strong bones today that we really see as an opportunity to build on with the proposed actions. Mott Avenue, as I mentioned, is a major east to west corridor in downtown Far Rockaway today. And at its corner with Beach 20th Street, you really get a sense of some of the kind of iconic buildings that harken back to Far Rockaway's village character. The Smith Building was built in 1931. It's currently home to the offices of the council member for Council District 31, as well as the community board. And it really helps strengthen the Mott Avenue corridor. But as you step away from this kind of major intersection in downtown Far Rockaway today, the scale of development really steps down to 1- and 2-story buildings, largely with ground floor retail on the ground floor. And the one thing that the city team really heard from the community was the desire for a broader range of commercial uses in the downtown core. The existing retail offerings are really nail shops, barber shops, liquor stores, and some clothing shops today. And it really speaks to just the lack of retail offerings that have been long desired in this community. Central Avenue is a major kind of north-south spine that actually connects the downtown area from the Nassau Expressway. It's one of the three main roadways into the downtown core today. And a little bit different than Mott Avenue, Central Avenue is much more civic in nature. It's home to several community facility buildings, professional offices, medical facilities, downtown's fire station, as well as two new charter schools. So it's a strong corridor today, but its character is a bit different than the more commercially oriented Mott Avenue. But it is a strong component of downtown Far Rockaway's current character. Another corridor that also reflects that strong character is Beach 20th Street. Beach 20th Street is a local retail corridor, and as you can see on the picture on the left there, you get the sense that the village feel of the downtown with the brick sidewalks that are maintained to this day, with the transparent retail operations that really kind of invite commercial activity along this corridor. This is really what the community wants to see everywhere in downtown Far Rockaway, not just on Beach 20th Street and portions of Mott Avenue. One of the downtown's few open space resources is a new through-block plaza, which opened in December of 2015. And it's really one of the few places in the downtown today where visitors and residents can take a break from shopping or on their way home from the A train station and just take a moment to sit. And so this is a vital resource in the community today, and certainly something that the community expects to see more of in a revitalized downtown. Now, according to the 2010-2014 American Community Service Survey, the Far Rockaway Bayswater neighborhood tabulation area has an approximate total population of 52,266 persons, which represents about a 4% increase since 2000. Now, this is an area that's larger than downtown Far Rockaway and Far Rockaway proper, but it is a sampling of the population that we feel very comfortable using to generate some of these other statistics that we feel that is important for the commission to understand. Downtown Far Rockaway is approximately 40% Black or African American, non-Hispanic, 26% is white non-Hispanic, and 25% is of Hispanic origin. Approximately 35% of the area's population is foreign-born, which is a little low for Queens, but 89% of that population comes from Latin America. The age distribution in the area is roughly on par with those of Queens and New York City, though Far Rockaway has a higher concentration of persons 18 and younger, 32%, compared to Queens and New York City, which are both in the low 20%. The percentage of Far Rockaway's renting occupied households, 74%, also well exceeds those of both Queens and New York City. The average household size is approximately 3, and the local area median income is approximately $42,000 in 2014. Now, the 2016 New York City area median income is $81,600 for a 3-person family. So we're really operating about 50% of the city's area median income in downtown in the Far Rockaway area. Approximately 48% of renting households in Far Rockaway spend more than 35% or more of household income on rent, and approximately 11% of the area's population is unemployed, and that's double the rate in both Queens and New York City. So the area's housing and economic challenges have really been at the forefront of a comprehensive community planning process in downtown Far Rockaway that commenced over a year ago. In October 2015, Councilman Donovan Richards, in partnership with City Hall, convened the Downtown Far Rockaway Working Group, a group of local and state elected officials and community, business, and nonprofit stakeholders to develop a set of goals and recommendations to support the revitalization of the neighborhood. The working group met 5 times and received input from over 100 community members at a public meeting in January of 2016. And the participants at that public meeting gave insights into the area's challenges and opportunities, as well as their recommendations for shaping the future of downtown Far Rockaway. In February 2016, the Downtown Far Rockaway Working Group sent a letter to the mayor outlining its goals and recommendations for shaping the future of downtown Far Rockaway. And the working group's goals were to reestablish downtown Far Rockaway as the commercial and transportation hub of the peninsula, to reposition the area as a mixed-use district, including new mixed-income housing, and to activate the public realm with new connections and public open space, to improve the quality of life for residents through access to community services, education, and quality jobs, and to build the capacity of community organizations to support local businesses. In May 2016, the city and the working group co-hosted another public meeting to show progress on the planning effort and to help gather feedback on the revitalization strategy. In August 2016, the city, acting through EDC in partnership with other city agencies, released the Downtown Far Rockaway Roadmap for Action, which I'm pleased the commissioners have in front of them right now, as a comprehensive response to the working group's recommendations. The roadmap integrated land use tools with infrastructure investments and improved community services to transform the downtown into a vibrant mixed-use center, and it included 5 broad strategies. Identify opportunities for new mixed-income housing, to improve transportation infrastructure and transform the public space, strengthening existing commercial corridors, small businesses and connections to jobs, expanding upon community services and cultural assets, and also to rezone the downtown area to unlock potential for commercial and residential uses. The Roadmap for Action identified potential land use tools to be used in conjunction with a $100 million investment in infrastructure and services to transform the downtown core into a vibrant mixed-use core. The public improvements outlined in the Roadmap for Action include a comprehensive streetscape and pedestrian safety redesign effort led by the Department of Transportation, sewer and water delivery system upgrades. Much of the downtown today actually lacks catch basins, so it's an area that, while it survived well during Hurricane Sandy, during its higher elevations, really struggles with heavy downpours. And the new DEP's sewer work is really focused on alleviating that issue in the community, as well as improvements to the area's existing recreation facilities, including the Sorrentino Recreation Center, which is in downtown Far Rockaway in the study area, and Grassmere Playgrounds, which is just outside of it. Storefront improvements and career service training led by the Department of Small Business Services. And really the exclamation point on the city's initial investment in downtown Far Rockaway is a new branch for the Queens Library of Far Rockaway. It would replace an existing single-story facility. Actually, the construction is just about to begin this year. Within 2 years, downtown Far Rockaway will have a brand new state-of-the-art library at a key focal point along Central Avenue and Mott Avenue. The land use actions in the Roadmap for Action seek to build on these investments with the aim of transforming the area's many vacant and underutilized lots with appropriate mixed use and mixed income development. And the actions include creating a new, highly focused urban renewal area to support the redevelopment of key underutilized parcels in the middle of the downtown today, to rezone the downtown core, to update the mix of uses and the scale of new development, to allow the city to, also the third action, to allow the city to dispose of 2 underutilized sites it owns for redevelopment with affordable housing, retail, and community facility space. The first action is the creation of a new urban renewal area and plan. HPD seeks to create a new highly focused urban renewal and plan and to acquire and dispose of properties within this area to support the activation of a catalytic site in downtown Far Rockaway with new mixed-income housing, commercial and community facility space, as well as new publicly accessible open spaces. The proposed urban renewal area consists primarily of the largely vacant shopping center site, which I'm showing on this map in purple. That site itself comprises approximately 75% of the land area in the urban renewal area. Automotive-related uses, a scrap metal recycling facility, a live poultry establishment, a bank, and 7 residential units make up the remaining portion of the urban renewal area. The proposed urban renewal area and plan will complement the proposed special district, which I'll talk about in a second, and allow the city to implement a comprehensive plan for a catalytic development site using negotiated acquisition or condemnation as necessary. In addition to the urban renewal plan, updates to zoning are also proposed because current zoning does not provide a framework for downtown Far Rockaway's beneficial growth and vitality. While zoning in Far Rockaway's lower density residential enclaves has largely been updated over the past 10 years, it remains virtually unchanged in the downtown since 1961 and does not support downtown Far Rockaway's revitalization. New residential development in key areas and along its major corridors is not permitted today. This is largely in C8 and M zones, which comprise a significant portion of the area today. And in areas where residential uses are permitted, existing R5 zoning, found generally at the periphery of the rezoning area, limits new development to lower densities that curtails the production of mixed-use, mixed-income buildings, and diminishes the potential of the major corridors to be lively, pedestrian-friendly destinations with a range of retail uses and services. To unlock the development potential of downtown Far Rockaway and to allow a range of uses that would complement the downtown setting, an amendment to the zoning map is proposed to change existing zoning on all or portions of 21 blocks. The proposed zoning districts would rezone much of the area to R6 with a C2-4 commercial overlay, which would allow 5 to 10-story buildings with community facility and commercial uses on the ground floor and residences above. The area between Mott Avenue and Namayoke Avenue, really between the two train stations, would receive the highest density zoning district. That area is proposed to be rezoned to R71 with a C2-4 commercial overlay. This would be an area where 6 to 12-story mixed-use buildings would be permitted, again with community facility and commercial uses on lower floors and residences above. A small portion of the rezoning area would be rezoned at the very southern extent of the study area from C42 today to R5 with a C24 commercial overlay. And the objective here is really to provide a transition in height as and limit the range of uses near the periphery of the rezoning area. Along those same lines, existing C12 and C22 commercial overlays would also be removed from portions of 3 blocks within the rezoning area to provide a transition from the commercial core to the more residential context at the periphery of the rezoning area. A proposed zoning text amendment would establish the special downtown Far Rockaway district within nearly the entire 21-block rezoning area in order to guide new development to blend into the existing neighborhood fabric and preserve downtown Far Rockaway's historic village center. It would also foster a broad and vibrant mix of commercial and residential uses, help enliven the streetscape, and more closely reflect the area's automobile ownership rates. Within the proposed R6 and R71 districts, the special district would increase the maximum residential FARs within those districts to 3.6 and 4.6 respectively, to support the redevelopment of new mixed-income housing. It would also establish maximum building heights of 55 feet, and this is really being proposed to ensure that new development reflects the mid-rise character and height of buildings in downtown Far Rockaway today, which are generally between 4 and 6 stories tall. And that height would ensure, again, that new buildings would reflect that existing fabric and that existing height. And as I mentioned, the special district would also adjust accessory off-street parking requirements to reflect the auto ownership rates in the area and its access to mass transit. As I mentioned, the special district is designed to work with the urban renewal area to provide a framework for development that would really unlock this very complicated and large site's development potential. In addition to the general zoning parameters that I mentioned just before, the special district would establish additional controls on the urban renewal site. It would require a new publicly accessible open space along Mott Avenue to really activate this major corridor in downtown Far Rockaway today. It would require a publicly accessible private street network with flexibility for connecting to the existing street network to, again, break up the super block and provide a desired connection between the area's transit resources, which again are the A train station along Mott Avenue and the Long Island Railroad station along Namayoke Avenue. It would adjust allowable building heights to reflect the existing scale of the surrounding neighborhood, and here we really want to be sensitive to the lower scale along areas like Redfern Avenue, which this development site sits directly across. On the west side of Redfern Avenue, you really see buildings of 2 to 3 stories in height, so the proposed zoning treatment would really limit new building height along Redfern Avenue to 4 stories to complement this scale. Height would step up slightly along the Mott Avenue corridor to really fill in this big missing piece to the corridor and allow building heights to rise up to 6 stories. And then what would happen as a result of the special district's bulk controls is height would then step up into this larger site towards the middle, where it could blend a little more seamlessly into the surrounding fabric. So you'd have lower building heights along the periphery of the site, and then those building heights would steadily rise up to 15 stories in the center of this large development site. In addition to the publicly accessible open space on this site, the special district would also require sidewalk widenings along Mott Avenue, Redfern Avenue, and Central Avenue, again, to enliven the pedestrian experience of this major corridor. Again, another couple slides, just touring around the area, but also showing what could happen as a result of the proposed actions and the special district in particular. Here again, we see the view of someone leaving the A train station and looking into the downtown Far Rockaway shopping center site, looking north. And here you see a transformed shopping center site. The first thing that you notice is really a new central space, a new village center in the downtown, which, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, is something that's lacking in the area today, as well as an open space and urban design strategy that really encourages people to come into the site today, which is not a phenomenon that happens today, to again ensure safe crossage across Mott Avenue and into these new lively open spaces, which would be then lined with ground floor retail and community facility uses to create a very vibrant experience. Here's the shopping center site looking east along Mott Avenue, and you can see that really automobiles are given, and have for decades been given, the priority along this key corridor. Pedestrians are really an afterthought and are given a very small amount of space on the streets and sidewalks today to walk around the downtown core. But again, the zoning strategy would really unlock the site and make it much more pedestrian friendly, not only by widening the sidewalks, as I mentioned, but by creating a new central gathering space that can have spill-out seating from the commercial uses on the ground floor of these buildings, but also programmable space should community events want to be planned in these new open areas, and really create a new center in the downtown. Here's a view of Namioke Avenue and Redfern Avenue. This is looking at the downtown's other gateway near the Long Island Railroad Station. The station itself is just on the other side of this vacant brick building. And here again, you see a transformed gateway into downtown Far Rockaway from the Long Island Railroad Station, with new mixed-income, mixed-use, mid-rise buildings that really reflect existing scale and found in downtown today, but really seek to unlock development potential in an area where residential use is not even permitted today, to create, again, a new gathering space and a sense of arrival near the Long Island Railroad Station. In addition to establishing the special downtown Far Rockaway district, a zoning text amendment is also proposed to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area within the R6 and R7-1 portions of the rezoning area. As the Commission is aware, under the city's mandatory inclusionary housing program, a share of new housing is required to be permanently affordable when land use actions create significant new housing, potentially as a part of a city neighborhood plan or a private land use application. And it's really a tool for the city to reach a broad range of income levels, taking into consideration the neighborhood dynamics. The city is proposing that both MIH options, option 1, 25% of housing floor area at an average of 60% area and median income, and option 2, 30% of housing floor area at an average of 80% AMI, are selected to begin the public review process. Now, mandatory inclusionary housing, of course, represents the floor, not the ceiling, for affordable housing that could be ultimately achieved in downtown Far Rockaway, and HPD is currently evaluating how its programs can be used to broaden and deepen the levels of affordability in downtown Far Rockaway. The final action is the disposition of current city-owned property. DCAS seeks the disposition approval of 2 city-owned parcels. The first parcel is located on Beach 21st Street, just to the south of the A train station, which is under the jurisdiction of the Department of Transportation and the MTA. The second site is located to the north of the rezoning area, north of Namioke Avenue, and it's within the jurisdiction of the Department of Sanitation of New York. The DOT MTA disposition site is located directly south of the A train line. The site is currently used as a layover area for buses and a municipal parking lot. Now, a fair share analysis was completed and prepared with the Commission's briefing materials for this weekend for the proposed closure of this facility. The fair share analysis concluded that the parking facility and bus layover area are generally underutilized. The analysis noted that the facility has a capacity of 70 spaces and a utilization rate of approximately 31% during weekday midday peak period and 33% during Saturday midday peak period. And also that the surrounding area contains sufficient opportunities for on-street parking to more than make up for the 70 spaces that are currently in the downtown, in the municipal parking lot today. The fair share analysis also noted that as a part of the Department of Transportation's Urban Design and Streetscape Reconstruction Project, the bus layover use will be relocated to an on-street location directly across the street from this existing facility on Beach 21st Street. An approximately 14,000 square foot portion of the site would remain in DOT's jurisdiction to be improved as a new through-block plaza that would improve the area's connections with the A train station. But the remaining 43,000 square foot portion of the site would be developed pursuant to the proposed zoning following a competitive RFP process led by EDC and HPD. The approximately 14,000 foot Department of Sanitation disposition site is located just to the north of the urban renewal area. It is currently vacant and not proposed to be rezoned as a part of the proposed actions. It is expected that the site would be redeveloped with as-of-right residential uses pursuant to current R3X low or density residential zoning. Department of Sanitation of New York has determined that this site is surplus and will transfer jurisdiction of the site to DCAS to allow it to be redeveloped following a competitive RFP process. Now, both sites are expected to be disposed of by sale or for lease and are expected to be redeveloped with affordable housing, community facility space, and or retail. So in sum, the proposed actions would support downtown Far Rockaway's orderly growth by fostering a vibrant mix of residential, commercial, community facility uses on vacant and underutilized sites near mass transit resources and along the area's primary corridors. The proposed actions aim to focus commercial activity along Mott Avenue, concentrate density along a new north-south walkable connection between the A train and the Long Island Railroad Station, blend new development with the existing neighborhood scale along its edges, and create new programmable open spaces that would then connect to the new library and the DOT Plaza. According to the analysis that was performed for environmental review purposes, the proposed actions could result in the development of up to 3,000 units of housing, 244,000 square feet of commercial space, 92,000 square feet of community facility space, and 36,000 square feet of publicly accessible open space over a 15-year build period. The depth and levels of affordability for these units, as I mentioned, are still being determined. To reflect this increase in density, an environmental review has been underway, being led by the Deputy Mayor's Office for Economic Development, who is the lead agency. The draft EIS disclosed that the project could have potentially significant impacts in the following categories: daycare, open space, traffic, pedestrians, and buses, as well as construction noise. And between draft and final environmental impact statements, the city agencies will be working together to explore options for mitigating these impacts. Now, approval of the proposed actions would facilitate the implementation of a series of land use actions that were outlined in the Roadmap for Action, the city's official response to the recommendations of the Downtown Far Rockaway Working Group. The working group noted in its letter to the mayor that a lack of investment and outdated zoning regulations have resulted in underutilized properties, a lack of housing options, and underperforming retail corridors, limiting downtown Far Rockaway's ability to realize its potential as the commercial and transportation hub of the Rockaway Peninsula. The proposed actions would support downtown Far Rockaway's revitalization, ensure its orderly growth, reduce inequity within the area by increasing the diversity of new housing, and increase economic opportunity by supporting a range of commercial uses and creating new publicly accessible open spaces and linkages between the area's mass transit resources that would enliven the downtown core. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brendan. And very well done. So we will open it up to questions if there are any questions. Let's start with Ms. Delos.
Hi, Brendan, and thank you. That was very well paced.
Appreciate it.
We were able to keep up with that. So a couple questions. I'm just wondering, I think you said 7 residents would be impacted by the proposed urban renewal plan. It's hard to tell exactly, but at least 5 of those seem to be housing partnership homes. Is that true? Which may mean that they were relatively recently developed? Not true? No. Well, that's one of the things that you could get back to us on.
Sure, yeah.
It would be helpful. And I'm sure we'll be hearing from the residents that may be impacted as part of this process. What's the width of Redfern, and what's the width of the proposed new street that would cut through what the
Sure,
the
Redford
shopping
today is
area?
a pretty narrow street. It's only about 50 feet wide, sidewalk to sidewalk. And the idea with the new private street network is that it would be designed to have flexible location zones for connecting with existing east and west connections, and a new north-south connection that would open up this area to Namiok Avenue. And the zoning special district will require that these new private streets be designed to DOT street standards, which are generally 60 feet wide.
Okay. And the other 2 questions that I had, you mentioned that in the shopping center now, there's a supermarket. I'm just wondering what other supermarket facilities exist in general on the peninsula, in particular, perhaps this side of the peninsula. And is there any special consideration that needs to happen given its potential importance, and the same with the daycare impact?
Sure. So there are a few supermarkets. The one in the shopping center today is a Food Dynasty, but there's also a C-Town in downtown Far Rockaway today. In Far Rockaway proper, there's another grocery store, but it is an area that's generally pretty underserved by supermarkets. But certainly the proposed zoning strategy and development program for the urban renewal site would include space for a new supermarket about the same size as the Food Dynasty today.
Okay. Okay. And then my last question just has to do, you went through the community profile in terms of demographics. I'm just wondering to what extent during the community planning conversation issues of youth development, workforce development, and adult education and literacy came up, and whether there's a separate conversation happening about that.
Yeah, it's certainly a need that's been a focus of the councilman and the community, the need for workforce development and activities for its substantial population of young people to do in the area. That's why the work being done on the Sorrentino Recreation Center, just to make it a more comfortable space to be during hot summer days by installing a new HVAC system, will have an improvement there. Today's presentation has largely been focused on the land use actions that are part of the roadmap for action that you have in front of you, but there are a number of workforce and economic development strategies that the city is looking into to support downtown Far Rockaway's existing residents to ensure that they have quality access to jobs. There is a current workforce development set up in Far Rockaway today that really seeks to connect residents to the resiliency and recovery work program being led by the city. So it's certainly a start, but there's definitely more to come on that front.
Thank you.
Ms. Efron.
Thanks. In honor of this being the last review of our chairman, I would be remiss if I didn't ask about regional plans for this, in part because it's surrounded by Nassau County on both sides. And other than the LIR, if you can just give us an idea of how this plan reinforces the possibility of leveraging the region. That's one question. Number 2 is, how many jobs does EDC project for this plan? And finally, you mentioned St. Joseph's Hospital, but I don't know exactly where it is and how it relates to the plan. Oh, St. John's. Sorry.
Yeah, St. John's Episcopal Hospital is, as I mentioned, the peninsula's largest employer, and just to the south of the downtown area along Beach 20th Street. It's a major institution. It's the peninsula's only hospital after Peninsula Hospital closed prior to Hurricane Sandy. And it is going through its own comprehensive planning effort. Its facilities are being expanded, which is a very exciting development. So I know that of the city's workforce development programs, many will be focused in the healthcare sector. You mentioned about regional planning, and the region is really one of the kind of culprits in kind of the decline of downtown Far Rockaway today, where more suburban-style shopping centers are really drawing residents from Far Rockaway and elsewhere on Rockaway Peninsula out into Nassau County, where there is more traditional suburban shopping with large open parking areas and low-rise commercial uses. Here in the downtown, really, the idea is to establish a new kind of critical mass of population so that it can service a more kind of urban shopping environment. With certainly the hopes that shoppers from Rockaway Peninsula and even Nassau County would then come into the downtown and have the experience of being in a downtown that has other uses and services that you might want to make more a day out of. Entertainment venues and those types of things are also envisioned as part of downtown Far Rockaway today, which may be even a further drive for you once you get out into the suburban areas.
Well, there's a reduction in the parking requirements, and if in fact it's supposed to draw from Nassau County, I'm just wondering whether it's anticipated that will be public transportation realistically, or if it will be parking, and that's one of the reasons I asked the question.
Sure, and we certainly wanted to make the most out of the area's transit resources today, but we recognize that this is an automotive-dependent area and also an automotive-dependent kind of shopping experience. So the zoning strategy really tried to right-size the parking requirements for facilitating this type of development. We didn't want to be too restrictive, but we also wanted to reflect the kind of conditions on the ground. So adjustments were made beyond what would be required under the proposed zoning districts by the special district, which would, again, kind of tweak what would actually increase the parking requirements for commercial uses over what would be required under the proposed zoning if it were to be established on its own. It would actually increase slightly the parking requirement for low-income development, again, recognizing the auto ownership rates that we're seeing in the area today.
Well, actually, just to Ms. Efron's point on with respect to public transport particularly, in fact, this is one of the challenges of not thinking more regionally, which is that this is the terminus for the A train, and I believe also the terminus for the Far Rockaway line. Is that?
Yeah, it's a
So-
change, it's a change.
So the extent to which we do have public transportation between the suburbs and, or the near suburbs and the city, particularly on Long Island, is severely constrained. And that's a real issue that affects, obviously, both the economies of both Far Rockaway and Eastern Queens and Nassau County as well.
I just want to make a point of clarification. There are two Nassau Intercounty Express bus lines that do come into Far Rockaway. Those buses are both carrying sometimes residents from Far Rockaway to employment centers in Nassau County and vice versa. But I would echo what Brendan says. The strategy here for the retail and commercial growth is really complementing the additional density and additional housing that will be developed here. The idea here is to create the opportunity, not necessarily to compete with Nassau County in the type of offerings, but to complement those with additional types of convenience goods, not, comparison goods that you'd normally find out in Nassau.
So I stand corrected. So thank you, John.
Are the buses full?
Well, look at ridership there.
Ms. Levin.
Well, that actually gets to this whole line of inquiry gets to a constellation of questions I had, which is, what are the current commuting patterns where people live here, then where do they have to go to work? And then vice versa, supposing we end up with 3,000, why would someone move into the 3,000 new units here? Who's intended to live here, and what populations would make this neighborhood? I mean, I understand the idea of improving services for folks who actually live there, but why would you live here?
So to
That
answer
sounds more argumentative than I made it to be. It's not- It's just sort of curiosity about the link between the economic development goals and employment patterns and commuting patterns, and can we really make this happen?
Sure. So today, people live in Rockaway Peninsula, particularly the eastern end of the peninsula, typically either work on the peninsula or take the A train to downtown Brooklyn. That's a huge employment center for the Rockaway Peninsula. They utilize the Nassau County Express bus system and work in Nassau County, as John had mentioned. And also, we're seeing strong connections between the area and JFK Airport and the air cargo industry there. So that's kind of the existing kind of employment bases that are within certainly an hour of downtown Far Rockaway today. And again, kind of aside from the land use actions which we're discussing today, there is work underway with the MTA to identify opportunities to improve transit access to Far Rockaway. The chairman said that there's going to be a new ferry service servicing Rockaway Peninsula starting this summer. That won't directly connect people to downtown Far Rockaway, but it will provide key access to the middle of the peninsula. The city is looking at extending express bus service to areas further east on the Rockaway Peninsula. But there may also be ways to improve the Long Island Railroad service and the A train service so that the commute times into downtown Brooklyn and into Manhattan aren't as long.
Actually, I have a couple,
Go.
two more questions. One is, making all those pretty pictures happen is going to require robust participation by some private development partners. Are any of them on the scene yet, or is that all to be?
We've certainly heard some
Identified.
very encouraging things about the interest in developing affordable housing in downtown Far Rockaway. The city actually released an RFP for the redevelopment of the municipal parking lot site under the proposed zoning, and received a tremendous turnout from affordable housing developers who not only do work in Queens, but really citywide. So the city has been very encouraged by the response so far, and certainly would work with any affordable housing developer to ensure that the zoning tools that are designed kind of intentionally to be very flexible. As I mentioned, there's flexibility for locating the private street network and its alignment with existing public streets. There'll be flexible locations for where the publicly accessible open space will be created. We know we want it on Mott Avenue. We want to have some flexibility there. So we certainly want the zoning tools that are being proposed as part of these series of actions not to be so restrictive that it makes unlocking these challenging sites more difficult.
Okay. And then finally, I'd just like to ask about the city's recent changes in zoning to deal with resiliency questions and the application that any of those have within this rezoned area.
Well, the downtown Far Rockaway is actually one of the few areas that is today outside the 100-year flood zone, and it is in fact out of the 500-year flood zone as well, which is presumably where the 100-year flood zone will be, within 20, 30 years. So this very much has resiliency in mind by positioning this new development on one of the pieces of the peninsula that's on high ground. So that was definitely part of the thinking about this whole interagency effort being focused in downtown Far Rockaway, because in addition to its transit resources, it's just positioning higher above sea level compared to the rest of the peninsula. It makes it an advantageous place to look at in terms of where we want to concentrate new development to support neighborhood vibrancy.
But because it's not in the flood zone, the various zoning tools that we recently adopted for building elevation and dry flood proofing and all of that stuff does not apply?
Correct. So
here.
the current regulations only apply to development in the flood zone, but it's certainly something that I know the Department of City Planning wants to explore is how, thinking long range here, how can we provide zoning flexibility if someone who's currently outside the flood zone wants to do that in the future. That's another citywide effort that's a little bit of ways, but it is part of the thinking about how to be more responsive to climate change.
Okay, but not part of
Correct.
this stuff before us today?
Right.
Thank you.
Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, good morning. Some of my questions were answered around the parking issues, but I wondered, you also mentioned the desire to create new programmable plaza spaces. I know that there's that, walkway between
Yeah.
Beach 20th and Beach 21st, which, how is that maintained now? What's the model for maintenance of these new anticipated spaces? Because it can be hard to keep them up to the standards that a community might like.
One of our local stakeholder partners who is part of the Downtown Far Rockaway Working Group had representatives of the Rockaway Redevelopment and Revitalization Corporation. They're our community-based organization that we have on the ground in downtown Far Rockaway today. They worked with the city to get this plaza space built in the first place and are responsible for the maintenance of it. And they or other potential future community-based organizations could be tabbed to help support the maintenance of future open spaces in the downtown today.
Will they be financed to do that?
It certainly, the part of the city's efforts in downtown Far Rockaway will certainly be working with the organization to make sure it has the capacity to deliver on its not only workforce development goals, but also its role in ensuring that these open spaces are maintained. So,
And is there an exploration of other kinds of mechanisms that might provide financing to meet those needs?
yes, absolutely. And sorry, I was jotting down the note. We have several representatives from the Economic Development Corporation here who can speak to that a bit more than I can when this comes back. But yes, it's certainly part of the idea is that we want these spaces built, but also well maintained, and that the organizations who are doing that maintenance have the capacity to do that.
Mm-hmm. And another, just a quick set of questions, just around there's an estimate of about 3,000 units of mixed income residential units. How much do you anticipate that being affordable, and how will that play into, the increase in the parking requirement for low income or, income restricted, and the decrease in the requirement for, just market rate housing? Like, how does that play out on the ground? How much parking do we think we're gonna need to accommodate in what looks like an intent to create a pedestrian-oriented environment?
Sure. So, stepping back to the affordable housing. So, as I mentioned, that the levels and depths of affordability are something that the city is still looking at right now. But right now, the market for new housing development in places like downtown Far Rockaway is affordable housing with heavy city subsidy. There's just not a market today that generates anything but that kind of housing. And so over the near term, the expectation is that trend would continue into the future, where all new housing development would be seeking city subsidy, and with it provide substantial amounts of affordable housing. The city in its RFP on the DOT site committed to making that 100% affordable development, but is certainly looking at ways to have significant affordable housing opportunities within the urban renewal area, and then also through the development of a number of private sites, privately owned sites, which are outside of the urban renewal area, but in the rezoning area, would also expect to be largely affordable developments.
I mean, the parking, is interesting to me because, if you're all income restricted, you're gonna have to set aside, 25%. So that's 750 spaces. If you're all market, you're gonna have to set aside 1,500 spaces. That's a lot of parking to accommodate here, and I don't see any parking structures. I mean, we assume that every building is gonna have to accommodate that on their own, and then how does that play with, not wanting dead ground floor space,
Sure.
which can't hold retail because parking needs to be there?
Well, the zoning strategy would really require parking to be relocated behind ground floor uses. It would really seek to have kind of quality housing style rules embedded in the zoning, so that parking today, and these sites are certainly very large and irregular, could accommodate parking at grade without structured parking behind ground floor uses, so that those are very active and vibrant spaces. Certainly on the urban renewal area, there is an expectation that some of the parking could be accommodated on the private streets themselves, but that there would need to be a parking garage as a part of that project underneath at least
There would not.
there would be. So to accommodate that level of space, there would need to be a parking facility as a part of that development. But again, the expectation there is that it's an underground facility that, again, wouldn't detract from the the vibrant streetscape that the zoning seeks to achieve on these sites.
Mr. Knuckles.
Thank you. Brendan, you mentioned earlier a charter school. I'm just wondering, what is the educational presence on Far Rockaway? Is there a high school? How many schools are there?
I don't have those figures in front of me, but there are both private and public schools located in Far Rockaway and elsewhere on the peninsula today. There is a high school in downtown Far Rockaway as well as a intermediate and primary school. The charter schools have become kind of a kind of new phenomenon in the eastern portion of downtown Far Rockaway. We've seen more and more of those in the past decade or so that are, certainly identifying a need in the community for options, educational options.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cantor.
Isn't creation of an urban development community, the way you've described it, containing a certain number of residential opportunities between, but not creating opportunity for real mingling between people?
So the idea of using the urban renewal plan and the rezoning strategy together is because there is not a mingling of people really happening in downtown Far Rockaway today, because it's not a place where we really see a lot of people living. Most of the residential population in Far Rockaway is located on the periphery of the downtown today, and it's a mix today of largely well-established 1- and 2-family neighborhoods, as well as public housing campuses. The Redfern campus is located right to the north. And this is an area where we're going to see an opportunity to have that mixing occur.
Well, first of all, to have the mix occur, I think you guys have to do what you're doing now. But I didn't hear any conversation or farsightedness, if I could use that word, with respect to what's going to happen 10 or 15 years from now, so that the area doesn't look like so many areas in the city of New York where they're blocked off as low income, middle income, and there's no opportunity or desire for more affluent parties to even intrude on the edges. We're back to creating local zones of economic interest, economic capacity.
Well, I think the goal here, and I think it's been pretty clearly expressed, is to have mixed income housing. And so clearly with an MIH overlay that will guarantee that as the neighborhood becomes more affluent, there's permanent affordability forever for a certain percentage of the units, and conceivably, as Brendan indicated, mandatory inclusionary housing provides a floor, not a ceiling, on affordable housing. But I think the goal here is clearly to have a mix of incomes so that the challenges we've seen in the Rockaways over many decades of areas segregated by income are overcome.
It seems to me like it's a rather large enclave at the end of the day, which is, we could use the word affordable housing. And what are the opportunities for real social and economic growth in those areas?
Well, I think as the presentation is indicated and as the proposal indicates, this is 3,000, potentially 3,000 units of housing that will be mixed income. That's a pretty sizable chunk, and in a relatively contained area, and designed to do it in a way that maintains, if not enhances, the basic neighborhood character. And so I think that's an important start. 15 years from now or 10 years from now, as this plan takes hold, assuming it's enacted, none of these plans are immutable in the sense that they never change as conditions change. So if this neighborhood takes hold the way we all hope it will, I'm sure that there is further opportunity for growth in the Rockaways. Ms. Ortiz.
Hi. One quick clarification, there was mention in the write-up that there would be commercial requirements in the C24 district except the PRCA, PRCB, PRCB1, PRCC. Where are those? I can't.
So the PRCA, B, and C has to do with the parking requirements that we talked about before. Those are different categories of commercial uses that the zoning resolution identifies different parking rates for. The text would simply clarify that that full scope of commercial uses would have the same off-street parking requirement, or one space for every 750 square feet of commercial floor area. Whereas the requirement today, under the proposed zoning in a C2-4, would be a lower requirement at one space per 1,000 square feet. So that the PRCVs are just talking about the categories of the uses. What we do want to do also with the special district, though, is allow for some flexibility in the types of commercial uses that are allowed in downtown Far Rockaway today. There are use groups that are not allowed in C2 commercial districts that we'd like to see. These are entertainment venues, larger movie theaters, department stores. Those are, again, things that would not be allowed under proposed C24 zoning without the special district flexibility.
Okay, so what uses then would fall under those designations?
PRC, A, B, and C are generally general retail uses, supermarkets, grocery stores, the types of uses that service local shopping needs.
Okay, thank you.
But we will get a list to you of the uses that are permitted and not permitted in each of these areas.
Yeah, the way it's worded, it's that, except uses in those categorizations would require one space per 750, so I'm not sure.
No, the intent is really to have a kind of base parking requirement for commercial uses, just to set something kind of district-wide, so it's
Okay, yeah, just for me, some
Sure.
clarification would be helpful, thank you.
Ms. Efron.
Thanks. There's a reference to timely performance, which is great, but I'm just wondering what the expectation is for the bulk of this site, particularly the single ownership site beginning.
Well, certainly we have several months of public review ahead of us, and we'd
This is with the assumption that we've come to a conclusion.
certainly would welcome approval of these land use actions so the city could get started working on this as soon as possible. And I think the timeline for activating these sites is complicated because they're large, particularly the urban renewal site, which we would expect to be developed over several phases over several years. But certainly within the next 5 to 10 years, we'd expect that site, which is what we've identified as a truly catalytic site, to move forward.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions for Brendan? Hearing none, this is certified. Thank you very much, Brendan. Thank you very much, John. Really want to, yes. I do want to recognize, obviously, the great work of our Queen's office, John Young and Brendan Pillar, but also that this has really been, as I said at the outset, a true collaborative effort on the part of many, many, many city agencies. And I think the questions that you've asked about economic development and transportation and employment, the focus here today was on the land use implications of this proposal, but this is a much broader endeavor than that, and as this comes back to the commission, goes through the public review process. I'm sure that the entire team, including EDC and SBS and HPD and others, DOT, will be available to answer the questions that you've raised, and they haven't addressed them already, we'll be addressing them as this goes through the public process. Because I do think we all see this as, again, a next step in terms of really looking at a community that has, and a neighborhood that has not received the attention that it should, and not only creating more housing, more affordable housing, which the city needs, but also creating places for people to live in very livable communities. And the goal here is to make this a livable community. So, thank you very much.
I will now go to item number 2, page 46, proposed zoning map and zoning text amendments concerning Whitlock Avenue and 165th Street rezoning to facilitate mixed-use buildings with affordable housing. Our presenter is Justin Lamorello from the Bronx office. Item number 2, page 46.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Weisbrod, Commissioners. This is an application by the Ader Group, LLC, for a zoning map change from an M11 zoning district to R8A with a C24 overlay and a zoning text amendment to Appendix F for MIH in order to facilitate the development of 2 mixed-use buildings with 474 units of affordable housing. This proposal concerns 1125 Whitlock Avenue, a property containing 2 lots within the Longwood section of the Bronx Community District 2. The property is located to the west of the elevated 6 train with a station 2 blocks to the north on Whitlock Avenue. The elevated line begins to slope downwards across from the project site and continues underground starting at Aldous Street on the southern tip of the site. Beyond the 6 train line to the east is the Sheridan Expressway. Beyond that, the Amtrak and future Metro North rail lines, Concrete Plant Park, which is a park that opened in 2009 on the banks of the Bronx River. This area is well served by transit beyond just the 6 train. There's the 25 train near the intersection of Southern Boulevard and Westchester Avenue, and also multiple bus lines, including the BX4, 5, 6, and 27. Just to give some context, this project is located about a half-mile south of the Crotona Park East-West Farms rezoning from 2011, which rezoned a portion of a M zoning district to mid-density residential districts with commercial overlays, and that was in order to facilitate over 1,300 units of affordable housing, which are under construction today. The site is also included within the Sheridan Expressway Hunts Point Transportation and Land Use Study from 2013, and that recommended converting a portion of the Sheridan Expressway north of Westchester Avenue into a boulevard to better connect the community to the Bronx River waterfront. The study also made recommendations about the neighborhoods surrounding the Sheridan Expressway, including implementing land use changes along transit corridors in order to facilitate mixed-use affordable housing development. This property is bound on the east by Whitlock Avenue, to the south by Aldous Street, to the west by residential housing along Longfellow Avenue, and to the north by East 165th Street. The subject property is located within an M11 zoning district that has been in place since 1961 and does not currently allow for residential uses. M11 is characterized as light industrial with a max FAR of 1.0. The site today is under contract by the applicant and contains 5 one-story light industrial buildings, including auto repair and storage facilities. There's also a light industrial plastics facility located at the intersection of Whitlock Avenue and 165th Street, and this facility will be locating to the Hunts Point IBZ. The site will also be demolished in order to make way for the proposed project. The M district continues to the north and south, but directly to the west is an R71 district with mid-density residential buildings and 2-story semi-attached row houses. These photos show you what the subject property is like today. Photo 1 is at the intersection of 165th Street and Whitlock Avenue, and that contains the light industrial plastics facility that I mentioned. Photo 2 shows Whitlock Avenue looking north with the elevated 6 train on the right side of the photo and the subject property to the left. Photo 3 shows the auto and storage facilities on the site today. And photo 4 is a view from the Whitlock 6 train station looking towards the development site beyond the train station. So this proposed action would rezone the property from an M11 to an R8A zoning district with a C24 overlay. And this action would help to facilitate for approximately 474 units of 100% affordable housing. So as a related action, the applicant is also seeking a text amendment to Appendix F to designate the project site as an MIH area with option 1. This would guarantee that 25% of the units be designated at 60% AMI. For this project, that means about 119 of the units would be permanently affordable. The applicant is seeking HPD and HDC financing through the ELA and Mix and Match programs, and has proposed AMI levels from 27% AMI up to 80% AMI. There would also be about 48 units set aside for families experiencing homelessness, and this is part of HPD's Our Space program. The proposed project, shown here on the proposed site plan, is to build 2 14-story buildings along Whitlock Avenue and 165th Street with a total square footage of 426,107 square feet and an FAR of 6.9. The buildings would have a mix of studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom units. The first of the 2 buildings would be the south building that would be constructed first, followed by the north building. A parking facility with 69 spaces would be located at the cellar level of the 2 buildings, and the entrance to that parking facility is from the southern end of the south building, shown on the left side of this photo. There would also be landscaping and recreational space located on the southern and western portions of the site. The 2 buildings can be seen more easily in this elevation drawing. Building 1 on the left side of the photo would contain 9,520 square feet of community facility space on the first floor, with 242 units of affordable housing and housing for families experiencing homelessness above. At 14 stories, it would reach a total height of 139 feet with a 10-foot setback at 99 feet. Its build year is projected to be 2019. Building 2 would be constructed in phase 2, starting in 2019 and ending in approximately 2021, and contain 14,937 square feet of commercial space on the first floor, with 230 units of affordable housing above. It would rise 14 stories as well to a height of 138 feet, with a 10-foot setback at 105 feet. Each building's ground floor would range in height from 14.5 to 15.5 feet, and the residential floors would average a floor-to-floor height of 9.5 feet and a floor-to-ceiling height of 8 feet 7 inches. There are also additional setbacks from 165th Street, which you can see from the section drawing here. Section B on the bottom shows these setbacks. We coordinated with the applicant team to step down along 165th Street, and this resulted in setbacks at the 6th, 8th, and 11th floors. Section A shows a 20-foot distance between the proposed building and the rear lot lines, and this distance varies between 20 and 30 feet, and it also serves as a space for playground and recreational space for the future users of the building. This shows a proposed rendering of the site, and in conclusion, the actions to rezone the property and apply MIH would permit the development of 2 mixed-use buildings with 474 units of affordable housing, 25% of which would be affordable permanently. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Questions?
I do, though I approach it with confession that I have not been up there myself to look. But in looking on the internet, it looks as if this is a favored neighborhood of some graffiti artists. And I'm wondering if any of the buildings on this site have any graffiti art that is within the genre that's the others are considered
Right.
high art.
So from Aldous Street up to Westchester, there is graffiti all along the way. I think one of the photos here shows some of it on that the building with that has the plastics facility today. That building would be demolished. However, so building one on photo one shows some of the murals kind of on the side of the building. And then photo two, you can see some of it as well. They're really panels of art that are on that building, of graffiti art.
I suppose if certified, we'll hear about whether there are plans to transfer this art somewhere or preserve it in some way.
Yes, and I can also tell you that the applicant team is thinking of ways to work with local artists to feature art within the building and within their current designs as well.
That sounds good, but I guess I would be curious to know what would happen to what's up there already.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Justin? Ms. Levin?
Yes, Justin, I'm curious how this links up with, I'm struck by the fact that there's this piece and then there's the, right there, the Crotona Park East rezoning, all of that, much of that is now built, and I think the last time many of us were up there as a commission is when we did that rezoning. It's kind of neat to see it actually there. But there are not very many blocks in between that are still manufacturing, and so it sort of begs the question in my mind about plan for that whole manufacturing corridor. Do those in-between blocks want to be residential at some point also?
I can say that within the Sheridan Hunts Point study, it definitely recommended looking at this area for future uses and future developments such as this.
As residential. So
Yeah.
this is consistent with what the thoughts were that came out of the Sheridan Expressway study, land use study. It didn't go quite all the way this south, did it?
No, it talked about the area, it did talk about larger areas, and did not make specific recommendations, but did talk about things like increasing opportunities for affordable housing and mixed-use development.
Thank you.
I would just point out that this, broadly speaking, is in the Southern Boulevard area, which
Right.
we're looking at
We are,
generally.
for more residential.
At very, very, very preliminary stages.
Okay, good.
Any other questions for Justin? Ms. Deluz.
So I'm going to go in the other direction. Just in terms of the existing uses that are there, so it's all under one ownership structure for the existing uses? And about how many different businesses and jobs are represented? And is there any plan for them, working with them to relocate or?
Right, so at the north of the site is the light industrial plastics facility. I think that has the most employees with about 10. They are relocating, according to the applicant, to the Hunts Point IBZ. The rest of the site has maybe 2 or 3 businesses that do auto repair, and a large portion of the site is a storage facility. And I believe, according to the applicant, there's about 3 to 5 employees there. At this time, I don't know, and they don't know what the current state of that is, but I think it's something that we'll continue to look into.
Any other questions for Justin? Hearing none, this is certified. Thank you, Justin.
We'll now move to item number 3, page 60, proposed zoning text amendment concerning the Special Hudson Yards District, sub-area A3. Our presenter is Carolina Hall, the lead project manager from the Manhattan office.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. 517 West 35th LLC, care of the related companies, proposes an amendment to the zoning resolution, section 93-122, to extend the availability of an existing chairperson certification to sites of a minimum of 55,000 square feet in sub-area A3 of the Special Hudson Yards District in Manhattan Community District 4. The applicant plans to develop 451 10th Avenue, a 56,793 square foot zoning lot with 2 buildings, a largely residential building and an office building. Today, sites of at least 69,000 square feet can seek a chairperson certification to build residential floor area before the requisite commercial floor area on a zoning lot in several sub-districts of Hudson Yards. The applicant proposes to construct residential floor area first on a site that is below the lot requirement to qualify for the current certification. The text amendment would not alter bulk regulations or use regulations, but would allow residential development to proceed first. So the current, just for a little bit of background, the current section 93-122 was adopted as part of the special Hudson Yards district text in 2005. A key objective of the special district was to create opportunities for new Class A office space in proximity to Midtown and to activate underutilized land on Manhattan's west side with high-density development, coordinated mass transit, and of course open space. Generally, priority is given to commercial uses in 2 ways. First, by reserving the majority of floor area for commercial uses and requiring that commercial floor area be constructed before residential floor area is built. The goal was to preserve the availability of large sites and assemblages for generous commercial floor plates. To encourage a vibrant neighborhood, residential and community facility can be constructed alongside commercial floor area. 451 10th Avenue, outlined here in red, is comprised of 5 tax lots on block 707, which is bounded by West 35th Street, West 36th Street, 10th Avenue, and Hudson Boulevard, adjacent to Hudson Boulevard and Park. The northeast corner of the block is occupied by a 7,400 square foot out parcel. The zoning lot is located in sub-area A3 of the Special Hudson Yards District, which is also mapped over the block to the west of Hudson Boulevard and Park. The site is 2 blocks north of the Eastern Rail Yard and 1 block east of Javits Center, with proximity, of course, to the Lincoln Tunnel entrance. Neighboring blocks are undergoing a significant amount of construction, particularly office development. This is the special district text map showing sub-districts and sub-areas in Hudson Yards. Directly to the west of the development is a portion of Phase 1, Hudson Boulevard and Park, which is completed. Construction of, sub-area A2 to the south is an underlying C64 district and allows up to 33 FAR through the District Improvement Fund bonus and transfer from the Eastern Rail Yard. Their adjacent sub-districts, D2 to the east and D1, are underlying C28 zoning districts, or mapped with underlying zoning C28 district that permit FAR of 13 and 15 FAR through the District Improvement bonus and inclusionary housing. 451 10th Avenue has approximately 56,793 square feet of lot area and is occupied by surface parking lots with 148 commercial and industrial vehicles. The 7,400 square foot out parcel on the block at the northeast corner is constructed with a 6-story building used for automobile storage, and here are just a couple of photos. This is a photo along the north side of 35th Street, looking west towards the Javits Center. This is a photo also on 35th Street, across the street from the site, with a view of the vehicles that are parked on the surface parking lot on the subject site and the building that currently occupies the out parcel, and a view looking north across the current parking. 451 10th Avenue is in a C64 district within sub-area A3, which allows 10 FAR of non-residential floor area as of right, an additional 8 FAR of non-residential floor area through the District Improvement Fund bonus, which is a chairperson certification, and an additional 6 FAR through the District Improvement distribution of floor area in the large-scale planned sub-district A, which is a transfer from the Eastern Rail Yard, which totals a maximum of 24 FAR, which up to 6 FAR can be residential. In sub-area A3, residential use is not permitted until 18 FAR of non-residential floor area is developed on the zoning lot. The existing section 93-122 certification includes a provision that allows zoning lots of no less than 69,000 square feet to seek the chairperson's certification to construct residential floor area and reserve a portion of the zoning lot for commercial development. The current certification was included in Hudson Yards to allow development flexibility, but to also promote and safeguard the growth of commercial and office sectors in Hudson Yards. The 50,000 square foot reserve footprint for commercial development was considered to be appropriate for viable office floor plates that would house the types of firms expected to settle in Hudson Yards. The applicant intends to develop the subject zoning lot with 2 buildings totaling 1.363 million square feet of zoning floor area, a 10th Avenue fronting building, just the bottom right corner, on 17,275 square foot portion of the lot with 340,000 square feet of residential floor area and 73,000 or almost 74,000 square feet of commercial floor area, and a 948,000 square foot commercial building on 39,500 square feet of lot area fronting on Hudson Boulevard. In total, the development would have 6 FAR of residential floor area, 18 FAR of commercial, and total 24 FAR, which is consistent with the zoning requirement today. The proposed text introduces section 93-122C, which allows sites of between 50 and 69,000 square feet in sub-area A3 to phase development, only when 35,000 square feet of lot area is reserved for future commercial development, and when the lot is fully built out, the ratio of commercial floor area to residential is consistent with the densities that are required today in sub-area A3. The applicant believes that a footprint of no less than 35,000 square feet still allows for practicable commercial site that will yield suitable floor plates. Given the amount of commercial construction currently underway in Hudson Yards, the applicant prefers to proceed with the residential segment of the development adjacent to the other largely residential districts of Hudson Yards, sub-area D, to the north and east. If the proposed text amendment is adopted, the applicant will pursue several chairperson certifications to facilitate development of the site, a 93-122 certification pursuant to the amended text, a chairperson certification pursuant to section 9331 to seek the district improvement fund bonus, and a chairperson certification pursuant to 9334 to transfer floor area from the eastern rail yard. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions about this for Carolina? Ms. Levin?
Carolina, I'm kind of curious, I don't know if we remember, I certainly don't remember, why the threshold for this provision was set at 69,000 square feet? Because at that level, it wouldn't have applied to this end of this block even if the out parcel were acquired and part of the development site.
Right.
So this was never intended to be covered by this provision. What's the magic to 69,000 square feet?
My understanding is that the origin of the 69,000 square feet was specific to a use that was considering the sequence of development at the time. However, what was given very thorough consideration was the fact that it would also, the 69,000 square feet would set aside enough floor area, and that was the 50,000 square foot portion of the lot, in order to be able to accommodate a large enough floor plate for the types of tenants that were anticipated at the time. Of course, large law firms and banks, and since then the office market has
Evolved.
Well, yeah, so that's my next question,
Right.
is, you know, it sounds like the whole premise to this particular provision has changed significantly since the time this was put in place. And we were always told about needing large trading
Right.
floors. Well, there aren't any big trading floors anymore. And as you indicated, the office market isn't demanding those kinds of large floors anymore. Is it right to think that this is kind of an appendage?
Well, the certification still protects what was originally intended for Hudson Yards, was, again, to give priority to the commercial development. That is still very much the intention, in wanting to preserve
Right.
large enough portions of the site. And here, the 35,000 square feet is what's being proposed, but is still consistent. And we are approached about sites where we hear applicants still want to be able to maintain a large enough segment of the site for commercial.
Okay. So is it right that there's only one other area in A3 to which this change would apply?
It actually, the site that's on the western part of the Park and Boulevard is just under
Is too
50,000 square feet.
Okay, so
So it
there's
would not
method,
apply.
so there's method in what you're proposing here. And that's the site that's owned by the Javits Development
That's right.
Corporation? Are there currently plans for that site?
Not that,
Not yet.
not that we're aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Carolina? So I do want to note this really is Carolina's last appearance before the commission. Carolina is really one of the stars of the department, and we're all really sorry to see her leave. She and her family are moving to London, where Carolina is going to have the opportunity to work for the borough of Chelsea, Kensington. We'll see if the lessons she's learned here are applicable there, and we expect to see Carolina back with whatever she learns in London to at least give us some guidance and advice on that. I will just say that once I heard that Carolina was leaving, it was time for me to leave. So, she did indeed, and I just really want to wish her the best and say she has really been one of the, as all of you have seen over the last several years, she has really been one of the true stars of the department, and London is very lucky to have her, so.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Except this
Thank you,
wasn't in the
Carolina.
career path. You know, she is on her way to being a living ULURP, having started at a community board and stopped at every stage along the way. So the city council was the logical place for you to be going.
This is my way to bypass.
Wait.
Great. Thank
Wait.
you very much. Thank you.
We wish you the best, Carolina, and with that, this is referred out for 60 days. Carolina will not be here to see what happens when it comes back, but good luck.
So let's now go to item number 4, page 70, proposed renewal of our previously approved City Planning Commission special permit that would facilitate a mixed-use development, including affordable housing. And our presenter is Anand Amin from the Brooklyn office. We're on item number 4, page 70.
Afternoon, Commissioners. This is an application by RXR requesting a second and final renewal of a previously approved special permit that was originally approved in 2009 for a general large-scale plan. The previous approval granted a special permit for bulk modifications for lot coverage, intercourt recess dimensions, and street wall location to facilitate a new approximately 328,000 square foot mixed residential development in Fort Greene Community District 2. The project area comprises an entire city block and is bounded by Fulton Street, Vanderbilt Avenue, Atlantic Avenue, and Claremont Avenue, and is mapped with the C6 3A zoning district, which allows a range of high-density mixed-use residential and community facility uses of between 6 to 8.5 FAR with a max height of 145 feet. This area is extremely well served by transit with the 2, 3, 4, 5 AC, BD, NR, and Q lines all within 5 blocks, along with numerous bus lines running through the area. The surrounding area is located in Fort Greene, a primarily residential neighborhood with mixed-use corridors along Myrtle and Fulton Street. The neighborhood consists of 3 to 5 story brownstone row houses and medium-density apartment buildings, along with community facilities and institutional buildings scattered throughout. The block directly adjacent to the north is the Gateway Triangle Park. To the east, across Vanderbilt Avenue, is a mix of low to mid-rise residential buildings interspersed with institutional and commercial uses, including the landmark Church of St. Luke and St. Matthew. To the south, across Atlantic Avenue, is the Pacific Park Development, a 22-acre site which will include a series of 15 mixed-use, mixed-income residential developments, with 550 Vanderbilt, 535 Carlton, and 461 Dean nearing completion. Directly adjacent to the west, along Claremont Avenue, is PS 753, the Brooklyn School of Career Development, and an athletic field related to the Brooklyn Technical High School. The project area is approximately 2.9 acres and is currently improved with a 7 to 10 story loft building fronting on Atlantic Avenue that contains 584,000 square feet of commercial office space. The proposed development site is used as a surface parking lot for the existing commercial building and is located on the northern portion of the block along Fulton Street. In 2009, the project area was granted a special permit pursuant to Section 74743A for bulk modifications in order to allow a better site plan and design in response to an irregularly shaped block. Along with the special permit, the site was rezoned from an M11 district and an R6 district to the C6 3A district with an inclusionary housing designation. In 2014, the special permit was renewed for the first time. Shortly after, minor variations were made to the plans that were determined to be consistent with the approval of the original special permit. In the summer of 2016, ownership changed for the proposed development site, and this, along with economic conditions, are reasons why the applicant has stated construction has not commenced. The original special permit granted relief for the residential lot area coverage requirements, which at the time of approval allowed a maximum of 80% lot coverage on corner lots. The proposed development would cover 88% of the corner at Fulton Street and Vanderbilt Avenue to provide a wider court through the middle of the block and appropriate floor plates on the northeast corner of the block. Additionally, the special permit granted relief for the regulations governing inner court recess dimensions, which at the time required the width to be at least twice its depth. The proposed development did not meet this ratio because the design responded to the irregular shaped site and allowed for optimal residential floor plates. Lastly, the special permit granted relief from street wall requirements, which at the time of approval required the street wall to maintain the base height along the entire street frontage, except within 15 feet of a corner. The proposed development was granted flexibility so that the building could set back 38 feet from the corner of Claremont Avenue and Fulton Street in order to provide a wide enough primary entry to the building at the corner. Additional relief was provided in order to break up the facade and create a visual break between the proposed development and the existing building. The proposed special permit would facilitate the development of a new approximately 328,000 square foot mixed residential building with ground floor retail and below grade parking located at 470 Vanderbilt for a general large-scale development plan. The proposed development would include approximately 32,900 square feet of retail uses on the ground floor and approximately 295,700 square feet of residential floor area, comprising of up to 363 units, including 73 permanently affordable units. Pursuant to Section 1143, the City Planning Commission may renew a special permit for a final additional 3-year term, provided that the Commission finds the facts upon which the special permit was granted have not substantially changed. In their statement of findings, the applicant has stated the facts upon which the Commission issued the original special permit have not substantially changed. The application was referred out for informational purposes to Community Board 2. On January 11th, 2017, the Community Board voted 35 in favor, 1 opposed to recommend a renewal of the special permit. In conclusion, in order to facilitate the proposed development, the applicant requests a second and final renewal of a previously approved special permit for an additional 3-year term.
Thank you, Anand. Any questions about this? Hearing none, I'll ask for a show of hands to send an approval letter to DOB for a extension or a renewal of the permit. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you, Anand.
So let's now go to item number 5, page 139, proposed authorizations concerning a reduction in required parking and changes to an existing parking layout with respect to the redevelopment of the Hylan Plaza Shopping Center. And our presenter is Joseph Hefferty of the Staten Island office. Item number 5, page 139.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm here today to discuss with you the proposed redevelopment of the Boulevard at Hylan Plaza. The applicant is requesting CPC authorizations for layout of group parking facility and a reduction in parking requirements in a C41 zoning district, as well as chairperson certification of cross-access connections to facilitate the redevelopment of Hylan Plaza Shopping Center located in the Newdorf neighborhood of Staten Island, Community District 2. The site is bounded by Hylan Boulevard to the west, Ebbets Street to the south, Mill Road to the east, and an adjacent tax block with a mix of residential and commercial uses to the north. The existing shopping center is tenanted by a mix of small and large retailers, including a movie theater, big box department store, pharmacy, and several smaller clothing and dining establishments. Also worth noting in the area is sharing a boundary on the north lot line here is a U.S. Postal Facility. Slightly further north on Newdar Plain, it's a primary retail corridor in the area, which is predominantly pedestrian-oriented retail. Slightly east of that, we have Newdar High School and the National Park Service Miller Field, recreation fields. To the south, another large retail development adjacent to low-rise apartment buildings. There are numerous modes of public transportation in the area. Approximately 8 blocks to the northwest of the site is the Newdorp train station of the Staten Island Rapid Transit Rail Line, which provides service to Tottenville and St. George, as well as several MTA bus lines along Hylan Boulevard and Mill Road, which include 5 local bus routes connecting to the North Shore and west towards the Staten Island Mall, and 4 express bus lines providing connections off Staten Island. The site is located in the C41 zoning district, reflecting the large-scale destination retail uses that predominate the area. The surrounding area to the north and south along Hylan Boulevard is largely zoned C41, C81, and a mix of low-density commercial overlays. Hylan Boulevard is a primary retail corridor and includes a mix of destination and local retail uses from the site up along the along the east shore of Staten Island. The block immediately north of the site contains a mix of retail uses and attached 2-family homes built on a private street, which is located here. And the block immediately south is also characterized by a mix of commercial and residential uses, which include low-rise elevator buildings previously mentioned. Areas to the east and west of the site are zoned R3X and R31 and are largely characterized by single-family detached and semi-detached homes. The project area consists wholly of Hylan Plaza, a 357,000 square foot shopping center located on an approximately 24-acre lot. What's shown here above is the existing conditions of the shopping center as they are today. Hylan Plaza was originally constructed in 1958 with 348,000 square feet of floor area and 1,448 accessory parking spaces prior to the 1961 zoning resolution. In 2001, CPC approved an authorization for a 46% reduction in parking to facilitate an approximately 32,000 square foot retail addition. Following this approval, the addition was only partially built. In 2010, an application was approved by the CPC to modify the 2001 authorizations. These authorizations included the demolition of an 11,000 square foot building, the removal of the unbuilt portion of the 2001 approval, and the construction of a 13,000 square foot building. The application resulted in a net decrease of the approved floor area and thus a decrease in the parking reduction from 46% approved in 2001 to 37%. In addition, the site immediately adjacent to the project area on its northwest boundary, which would be located here, was recently subject to a 2014 CPC chairperson certification that no cross-access connections were required to Hylan Plaza due to the location of the existing building along the northwestern boundary here. However, at the request of the borough president, the owner of 2582 Hylan Boulevard, this recent development, intends to open the cross-access connection to Hylan Plaza upon construction of the proposed development there. There are currently 5 retail buildings with approximately 357,000 square feet of floor area and 1,414 parking spaces on the site. Accessory parking spaces for the commercial uses are primarily located between Hylan Boulevard to the west and the large L-shaped retail building here. So predominantly here. Access is primarily through the Hylan Boulevard and Beach Avenue intersection here. There's a large curb cut with secondary access to the parking areas slightly south of that on Hylan Boulevard and here on Ebbett Street. Additionally, curb cuts on Mill Road are predominantly used to provide access to loading areas. Currently, the frontage on Mill Road is used largely for back-of-house operations and is not, the parking areas are not used by visitors to the site. The redevelopment will consist of the demolition of approximately 290,000 square feet of retail building, shown above in green, the continued use of 3 existing buildings, shown above in blue, and the construction of 3 new buildings totaling approximately 386,000 square feet. In total, a net increase of 102,000 square foot of floor area and 239 additional parking spaces are proposed on the site, which upon completion will result in approximately 459,000 square foot shopping center with 1,653 parking spaces. The The demolished buildings will be replaced with 2 new 2-story retail buildings fronting on a new through lane that begins at the existing curb cut on Hylan Boulevard and Beach Avenue and continues to the east to a proposed curb cut here on Mill Road. This vehicular through lane creates a new east-west mode of travel through the site. The applicant refers to the portion located between the 2 proposed buildings here as Main Street, and I will continue to refer to it as that for the remainder of this presentation. The applicant states the redevelopment of Hylan Plaza with Main Street will provide, will provide patrons with better access to the shopping center by creating new entrances on Mill Road while activating new retail storefronts on Main Street, as well as the second-floor pedestrian galleries that are intended to serve as the primary center of the shopping experience. Main Street will connect the access lane from the Hylan Boulevard and Beach Avenue intersection to a proposed roundabout at the center of the site, which will then provide access to north and south parking areas. Main Street then continues, Main Street then picks up and meets here in the middle with another proposed roundabout, again providing access to north and south parking fields, and inevitably terminates at Mill Road. The north and south building frontages are framed by two new 2-story retail buildings, which are accessed by a total of 11 curb cuts, including 3 along Hylan Boulevard, 4 along Mill Road, and 4 along Everett Street. The applicant states that the addition and modification of curb cuts is intended to provide better access to the relocated parking fields and allows for better truck access to loading areas than current existing conditions. The ground floor will contain a series of smaller retail uses fronting along Main Street, fronting here, as well as a grocery store in the southwestern corner of this new building here, and a 1-story retail pad to be located at the intersection of Beach Avenue and Hylan Boulevard here. Parking areas will be located between Hylan Boulevard and the grocery store, behind the new buildings that front Main Street, and as well as diagonally along Main Street here. Parking areas behind the building and a ramp to a 2nd-story parking deck will be accessible from curb cuts on Mill Road and Everett Street, as well as the roundabout located at the center of Main Street. The 2 new buildings will be supported by 4 separate loading areas located in the rear of the building. The southern building is supported by 2 loading berths located here below the 2nd-story parking deck that primarily service the grocery store and some of the retail uses. An additional loading berth located here closer to Mill Road, which services retail buildings, and 1 additional loading berth to service the northern building's retail uses. All loading areas will be screened from the adjacent street and residential neighborhood or located beneath the 2nd-story parking deck. The 2nd story of both buildings will include commercial spaces for larger retailers, as well as a movie theater in the northern building and a 2nd-story parking area in the rear of the southern building. The 2 buildings are connected by a transparent sky bridge, highlighted there in red, that connects the open pedestrian galleries at the front of the 2nd level of each retail building. The sky bridge is designed as a metal-framed open bridge with glass balustrades covered by a canopy. It's approximately 160 feet long, 15 feet wide, and includes a seating area at the midway point. At the ground level, Main Street is intended to be the primary activated frontage of the development. Main Street is approximately 100 foot wide, curb to curb, and contains 100 diagonal parking spaces. The proposal includes 32 foot wide, partially covered sidewalks on both sides of the street, which will provide pedestrian access to ground level retailers and the 2nd-story commercial uses. In addition, the sidewalks along Main Street will provide areas for bicycle parking, opportunities for outdoor dining, and areas for planting and seating. At the center of Main Street, a roundabout is proposed to provide vehicular access to the parking areas in the rear of both new buildings. Raised crosswalks will be provided as a traffic safety measure for pedestrians crossing Main Street. Here, the applicant has provided us with the following illustrative renderings to give a better idea of the look and feel of this proposed Main Street. So as you can see here, this is a view from the main traffic oval in the center of the development, looking towards the east. So this is the beginning of Main Street. Things of note are open access to the 2nd-level retailers here, covered wide sidewalk experience of Main Street here, the sky bridge out here in the distance. Similarly, this is a view from the sidewalk of Main Street. This is facing west, highlighting areas for potential outdoor dining, planting, and raised crosswalks here, as well as the sky bridge in the rear. in the background. In addition to seeking an authorization for the layout of the parking area, the applicant is also requesting a reduction in required parking. The site currently contains approximately 356,000 square feet of floor area and provides 1,414 parking spaces, a reduction of up to 37% granted by the 2010 CPC authorization. The applicant's proposal increases the floor area of the development by 102,000 square feet. All uses on the site, from both proposed buildings and buildings that are proposed to remain, would require nearly 3,300 parking spaces as of right. The applicant is seeking to provide 1,652 spaces, which is a 49.8% reduction in required parking for all commercial uses on the site. The redevelopment would result in a net increase of 239 spaces from the existing conditions. As per section 36-023 of the zoning resolution, the City Planning Commission may permit a reduction of up to 50%. The applicant states that this reduction is justified by the results of their parking analysis. The analysis states that both the existing and proposed developments result in parking utilization rates of less than 40% during weekday and weekend peak hours. To facilitate the proposed development, the applicant is requesting the following actions. Layout of a group parking facility, where the commission must authorize the layout of commercial parking lots on lots greater than 4 acres. To meet the commission's standards, the applicant states that the new actions would allow for the creation of Main Street, connecting the existing entrance to a new curb cut on Mill Road, improving pedestrian and vehicular access to the site. They state that the parking located on Main Street, behind retail buildings, and at the second level allow for less travel distance from parking areas to the main retail buildings. And that the addition of new curb cuts along Mill Road and Ebbett Street provide equal vehicular and pedestrian access from neighborhoods to the east and limit interaction of loading berths with public areas. Regarding the reduction in parking requirements, the Commission may authorize a reduction of up to 50%, provided the proposed parking is deemed sufficient. The applicant requests a parking reduction of 49.8% from 3,293 required spaces to 1,653 required spaces. The applicant states that their comprehensive parking analysis shows that 1,653 spaces is sufficient to meet the parking demand generated by the proposed development. Subsequent to the proposed development, it is anticipated that the parking area will operate at a 34.1% capacity on weekday peak hours and a 37.6% capacity on weekend peak hours. In addition to these CPC authorizations, the proposed development will also require chairperson certification of cross-access connections, one which will be opened to the 2014 commercial development mentioned earlier, located on Hylan Boulevard, and one future cross-access connection cross-access easement will be mapped to the U.S. Post Office and will be opened in the event of any redevelopment to occur on that site. The proposed development has triggered the need for a targeted environmental impact statement to analyze traffic, air quality, noise, hazardous materials, land use, zoning and public policy, and neighborhood character. The draft EIS has concluded that the project will result in potentially significant adverse impacts with respect to traffic. In total, there were 10 intersections studied, 8 which were shown to be impacted, and additional measures will be explored and analyzed between the draft and final EIS. In summary, the proposed action will facilitate the redevelopment of an aging commercial center in the New Dorp neighborhood of Staten Island to create a more pedestrian-oriented retail destination. The reconfiguration of the parking lot layout is intended to allow for less distance from parking areas to retail buildings. The shopping center in total increases 102,000 square foot of commercial floor area and 239 parking spaces, pursuant to a 49.8% reduction of required parking from 3,293 spaces to 1,653 parking spaces. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thanks, Joe. Questions for Joe? Mr. Cirillo.
Thank you, Joe. Well, as someone who's spent a lot of younger years in this shopping center, it's really a very,
I'm not sure we want to hear the details.
no. And the design is very beautiful. But I have a couple of questions. I realize we're referring this out, and obviously the community board's input will be very helpful on this. But I have a couple of questions. Just on the, sort of on the rendering, that there are, it looks like back doors, or doors, I should say, on the back of the retail spaces, at least on the Main Street ground level. Are those just working entrances for the store itself, or since there's parking on the behind, is there an expectation that these will be store-throughs, or I mean, I'm looking at this, so I'm going by this, there are doors on the front and doors, like, there's doors on the loop road, and
Understood.
then the ring road, and then there were doors behind. So I just wondered if, one, we're talking about individual full stores, or is there a potential that there's two split stores? Or will there just be two entrances on either side of the store?
We do know that the primary entrances will be along Main Street. The use of these entrances that you're highlighting here that face in front of the parking areas is unknown to us at this time. We'd be happy to get back to you on that.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we'll see. The other thing is, I know this is very premature, but I find the, sort of the ring loop attractive, and I think they've designed it very nicely. But do we know at what point the regulatory scheme for the road, what it will be? I mean, I know just the human nature. I can envision people sort of pulling over on that road, waiting for someone in a store. It's sort of a pickup drop-off situation, which would potentially tie up the flow, which is designed to be accessible and to keep people moving. So, and again, I know the idea of what the signage will be on this road is, this is a premature question, but I just wondered at what point those kinds of things, or during the, between the draft and the environmental, just even on the internal aspect of how this will function, if that's been a consideration. Or will there be a pull-off area for pickup and drop-off in here, which is another question I guess I would ask.
So
I think people will use it, whether it's there or not, and I think not to, just to facilitate what's obviously been designed, we may want to look at ensuring that that can happen unless it's for handicap access or something like that.
So the new buildings that are being proposed along Main Street here, see here, I guess closer, you can view it from
Yes.
this angle. So angled parking is being provided directly adjacent to the curb.
Yes.
And this is something that the applicant has worked out with FDNY to make sure this complies with all of their standards as well. And the intention here is to be able to still provide the ease of access to parking areas directly in front of the retailers. And the second kind of half of your question, the portion here, which is the extension of the existing curb cut, with the exception of this one retail pad located here, there are no retail uses being proposed along that. That doesn't necessarily get to your point about the regulatory nature of this, but I think from the site planning design perspective, the intent was that activating Main Street would, would be the focus of the site and therefore where people are most drawn to.
Okay, good. And I guess we'll follow that, we'll kind of monitor that along the way. My last question involves what's clearly been identified as potential significant adverse
Yes.
traffic impacts in the area, right? And I know there's a variety of locations, it's not all of them, but majority of them, almost not all of them, have been deemed in some way adversely impacted by traffic. And I know some of it you just can't help, and it's a beautiful design. And obviously, this is a location for the last 50-plus years that has had a shopping center in it. It's not, they're not building, a new concept here, but it's obviously a much nicer one. I just wonder how does it, I can't think of the answer to this, but I know in this period of time between the draft and the final impact statement, there will be further review of this and potential ideas for mitigation to the impacts that do exist. But at what point and how do those suggestions, if embraced, get worked into this to ensure that the city, if DOT obviously is the agency responsible, how do we, in this approval, if at all, lock the city agency in that may be the ones to actually create the mitigation to the problem? Do we know? I mean, I know we have time for that. I'm sure the community board is going to comment on the traffic impacts, not necessarily in a way to stop this from happening, but that will certainly be an issue. And I just wondered what process takes place or how it gets worked in it all to our...
We have Bob DeBruskin here, who will perhaps be able to answer this question.
You can totally
Although,
answer this one.
it
I just wanted to get him up from back here.
So,
I'm curious about how this process works now. Go ahead, Bob.
it'll work relatively quickly,
Oh, good.
but we are working with DOT to see if there are feasible mitigation measures. And any suggestions we get during the public review process, DOT will vet. And to the extent that they do identify, excuse me, additional mitigation measures, they'll be incorporated into your approvals.
Okay, great. So in addition to the recommendations made through the approval process, and I'm assuming that means certainly the community's concepts of what, or, you know, meaning whether the elected officials or the community board or the public at large, but does DOT are they looking at this, I mean, I know they've looked at this already, but are they looking at this too, working on recommendations for this to help facilitate this? Or do they just wait for ideas to be brought to them and then decide if they're good ones or not?
You know, they want the traffic to work as
Of course.
well. So they are reviewing this, they will come up with ideas, and they'll also just vet any of the suggestions that we get from the community board and from electeds.
So it's a twofold, okay, very good.
They're the ones who are responsible for implementing the mitigation measures, so they want them to work.
So then just briefly to go back to the original question, if you know the answer to this, Bob, so let's say there's a great idea that everybody supports. I'm not sure what that will be, but let's say there was one. How does that idea get memorialized, if at all, to ensure that it actually happens, and it happens concurrently with the development of the
Well,
project?
I mean, let me see if, it depends obviously on what the idea is. I mean, if the idea is.
Correct, I'm making it simple for the
Yeah,
example.
I mean, if the idea is presumably, as it often is, synchronization of
Streetlights and-
streetlights,
Right, stop signs.
DOT is the only one that can do it, so
Correct.
they do it. They vet it and they do it. On the other hand, if, let's say, something more dramatic, let's say it requires a new driveway, that could be conceivably a requirement of the applicant to do it. And there are many things in between of those, but ultimately, it does depend on what the mitigation is, whether there is mitigation to begin with. And I would
Who's
assume
responsible?
who's responsible, whether the developer can even, though it's triggered by the developer, whether the developer has it within its capacity to do it. I mean, I guess, well, I'll let Bob respond further to this, but.
I'd just say, again, whatever mitigation measures are proposed and found to be feasible would be incorporated into the project's approval, so they would become a requirement of the project.
Okay, great, thank you, Bob, thank you.
Any other questions, Ms. Ortiz?
Hi. Really just a comment. I'm struck by, this being the second reduction we've seen from a private applicant that I'm aware of in Staten Island from a shopping center, and we saw a fairly significant reduction at the Staten Island Mall. Here we're seeing, I have to translate everything to 1,000 square feet, because that's what I think in terms of industry standard. We have a requirement here for retail at 6 per thousand, for food at 10 per thousand, which is unprecedented. I mean, that is just 1950s, planning. And these guys are requesting almost a 50% reduction. Kimco is not known for bucking convention here. They know what their tenants need and want. So it's just sort of a moment for us to recognize that our zoning sort of doesn't reflect the industry expectations anymore, and that we have a mechanism here to be able to reduce that, which is great, but to keep in mind as we see other things and to have a point of reference for what is, accepted industry-wide, particularly with respect to commercial.
Right, I mean, this district is C41, which is the same district that the Staten Island Mall is located within, and the parking requirement for that district is one space per 150 square feet of retail, which is very, very high.
Yeah.
So I think, it would be a goal to take a look at the parking requirements, or the zoning as it pertains to the parking requirements in a lot of these commercial districts throughout the island. But I think that, we'll continue making it clear to private applicants in the interim that, as appropriate, we would be in support of rezoning proposals so that, once and for all, the zoning is more appropriate for the site. Thank you.
Any other questions to Joe and Nicole? Okay, with that, this is referred out to the community board for 60 days, and we shall hear what they say. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Let's now go to item number 6, page 171, proposed zoning map amendment to increase the depth of an existing commercial overlay. This project is 901 Manor Road, and our presenter is Barry Fisher of the Staten Island office.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is a private application for zoning map amendment to increase the depth of an existing 100-foot deep C11 zoning overlay, commercial overlay on a R31 residential district to provide a consistent zoning designation on a deep corner lot. It would facilitate a commercial use on the applicant's property located in the Willowbrook section of Staten Island's Community District 2. If you recall, this project is at the intersection of Manor Road and Tillman Street. There's a small commercial corridor along Manor Road, and Tillman Street is a residential side street that connects with the commercial corridor. The C11 commercial overlay is mapped to a depth of 100 feet on the subject site, the development site, as well as other places on Manor Road. It's mapped to a depth of 200 feet where there is an existing drugstore. So the applicant would increase the depths to almost 200 feet to agree with their property boundaries. And it would allow a development, and the proposed development is a 4,000 square foot, one-story commercial building with 27 required accessory parking spaces. This project was heard by the Commission on November 14th and duly referred to Staten Island Community Board 2 and the Borough President, and both recommended approval without conditions, and the Community Board's vote was unanimous. A question was asked at the review session if a bank would be developed, and according to the applicant, the property owner was approached by a bank, which precipitated this application. The applicant's representative will be in attendance and plans to be here on Wednesday to address any concerns by the Commission.
Thanks, Barry. Any questions about this? Should be a fairly short and uncontroversial public hearing. Okay. Oh, question.
Could I ask a short and I hope uncontroversial question? When this was certified, we were concerned about the effects on the residential buildings immediately to the east. Did any of those residents show up to the community board hearing?
I do not believe, I did not notice any of those residents.
Okay, and is a landscape buffer required along that boundary no matter what happens here?
Yes, so a landscape buffer is required. It's required to be 4 feet. The way the applicant is proposing, it's deeper than that, so it exceeds that requirement.
So even if their site plans changed and the new building moved to the eastern end of the lot, there would still be a landscape buffer
That's right.
between any new building and those houses?
That's right. That's a rule in the lower density growth management area.
Excellent. Thank you.
You can even ask that short and uncontroversial question on Wednesday.
Now that I don't know what the answer is.
Ms. Knuckles. This is what I get for saying it's short and uncontroversial.
Barry, the two buildings to the right on Tillman Street, those are two residential buildings, right?
Right. Those are
single family, what are they?
those are I believe those are two-family homes, or I'm sorry, single-family semi-detached homes.
Each of them are semi.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Yeah, it would be 4 units, 4 dwelling units.
Any other questions for Barry? Hearing none, we'll see this on Wednesday. Thanks, Barry.
So our next Staten Island pre-hearing project involves the disposition of city-owned property or teleport Site A, item number 7, page 182, and our presenter is Alina Farishta.
Good afternoon. The application for the proposed disposition of property at the teleport site was certified by the City Planning Commission on December 12, 2016, and referred out to Community Board 2 in Staten Island. The project site is located in the Bloomfield neighborhood in the West Shore of Staten Island. DCAS proposes to dispose of an 8.58-acre city-owned vacant lot and an easement to EDC within the Teleport Office Park. EDC intends to dispose of this property to a selected developer, Corporate Commons 3 LLC. The prospective owner intends to develop a 240,000 square foot building with commercial office space, a bank, a restaurant, and medical office uses. Additionally, 885 parking spaces are proposed at grade and within a parking deck. In addition, pursuant to lower density growth management area regulations, 2 cross-access connections are being proposed to meet the requirements. The project area consists of the Staten Island Industrial Park, which is approximately 415 acres of city-owned property that is currently managed under contract by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. The Staten Island Industrial Park, known as Teleport, was initially developed in 1986 as a secure data center and satellite station. Over the years, some of the properties were sold off to private owners for the development of commercial office spaces, medical offices, and community facility uses. The surrounding area is predominantly within the M1-1 or M2-1 districts and built up with commercial, light industrial, and open space uses. In 2013, EDC and the Port Authority jointly released a public request for expressions of interest. Corporate Commons 3 LLC expressed interest to buy and redevelop Lot 120, which is highlighted in red. EDC selected Corporate Commons 3 LLC because the owner had demonstrated compliance with the requirements laid out in the RFEI, which included that a portion of the project had to include medical offices. Corporate Commons 3 LLC is proposing to develop a 6-story building with 173,000 square feet of commercial office space, a 2,000 square foot bank, a 5,000 square foot restaurant, and 60,000 square feet of medical offices, which also includes therapy pools. The use of the project site for a commercial and medical office building would be consistent with the 1983 Staten Island Industrial Park Final Environmental Impact Statement. In addition, the city will be disposing of an easement to the prospective property owners over lots 140, 160, 170, 190, and 200 to allow the construction of 12 surface parking spaces, other proposed site amenities, and to allow the prospective owner to establish 2 cross-access connections. As mentioned earlier, this application was referred out to Community Board 2. Community Board 2 voted unanimously to recommend approval of the application. The Staten Island Borough President also recommended approval of the application. And in addition, the Staten Island Borough Board recommended approval of the proposal and the contract terms of the proposed disposition. EDC has responded in writing to questions raised by the Commission at the review session held on December 12th regarding the project milestones agreed upon with the selected developer. EDC stated that at the closing of the sale of Teleport Site A, a deed will take effect that contains requirements for Corporate Commons 3 to commence construction on the project as described within 6 months of closing. Construction must be completed within 24 months of closing. EDC's approval is required for any changes to building uses or transfers in ownership interests within 5 years of closing. If any of these requirements are not complied with, EDC has the right to reacquire the property without compensation. Thank you.
Thank you, Alina. Questions for Lena? None. Public hearing on Wednesday.
Yes, thank you.
And just as a heads up, the applicants have asked if we could advance your consideration of this project to February the 22nd, as opposed to later. And given the favorable community board recommendation as well as borough president recommendation, and we do not expect any negative testimony on Wednesday, we'd like to just give you a heads up that that request, sounds like I'm seeing a lot of shaking of heads, will be favorably considered. Great. So now let's move to item number 8, page 198, proposed UDAAP designation project approval, disposition of city-owned property, and a special permit to facilitate affordable housing in Community District 16, Brooklyn. I'd like to introduce Anthony Grande, who is making his very first presentation before the commission. Brooklyn office. Item number 8, page 198, 210-214 Hegeman Avenue.
Thank you. So this is an application on behalf of the Department of Housing, Preservation, and Development. The two actions, as were mentioned, are an urban development action area project designation, project approval, and disposition of city-owned property, as well as a zoning special permit, which would allow an FAR of 4.8 for this type of community facility in this district. Location is 210-214 Hegeman Avenue, and it's in Brooklyn, Community District 16, in the Brownsville neighborhood. So taking a look at the location, this is 2 tax lots within this particular tax block in the southeastern portion of Brownsville. And that block runs between Hegeman Avenue on the north to Linden Boulevard on the south end, and also between Watkins Street and Mother Gaston Boulevard. So the existing zoning on this site is R6, which is the predominant zoning district in the surrounding area. There's also an M11 district to the northeast, which is predominantly a linear district that runs along the rail corridor with the L line as well as the Bay Ridge Freight Line. And then there's also an M31 district to the south, predominantly R6 in the surrounding area. There's also existing land uses in the surrounding area, predominantly residential, mostly 2- and 3-story attached and semi-attached residential buildings. In addition, there are the Plaza residences, which is right across the street in the large block that can be seen there. And those are 6-story structures, and there's 3 of them. Those are affordable housing buildings built in the 1960s and also renovated in the 2000s. In the surrounding area, we have the Brownsville Recreation Center to the east, 1 block, and also the Osborne Playground, 1 block to the west. Directly adjacent to this project area, there is a 1-story church to the right, or to the east of the project area, which is on the corner. And then just to the west, there's a 3-story structure, which also has ground floor retail as a mixed-use building. And then the area is well served by public transit. The L subway line stops at New Lots Avenue, just to the northeast, about 6 blocks away. And also there's several bus lines in the area, stop directly in front of the project area on Hegeman, as well as New Lots. And you can see Linden Boulevard is a very wide street, major thoroughfare in central and eastern Brooklyn, which is running just to the south. So in these photos, we can see the project area itself. It's 2 tax lots, as I mentioned. It's under HPD ownership, and they are a total of 7,600 square feet. And you can also see, actually, yeah, in these photos, you can see Veterans Triangle in the upper right here, which is directly in front of the project area. And then also visible in the photos is the Plaza residences just across the street as well. So the proposed development is an 8-story structure. The total number of units would be 70, and these are studio units. Total square footage would be 36,160, and there would also be 1 superintendent unit. We can see the building sets back, the street wall sets back from the property line 5 feet, and that allows for landscaping in the front. The street wall rises to the maximum of 60 feet that's allowed in the R6 district, and after 60 feet, sets back to then a total of 15 feet before rising up to the total building height of 79 feet, 4 inches. So that 15-foot setback that we see at the 60-foot height is allowed by a mayoral zoning override. And the 15-foot setback would be the requirement for a wide street, whereas Hegeman is a narrow street. So in addition to that, the total proposed FAR is 4.76, and that's within the 4.8 that I mentioned would be allowed for this type of community facility with the zoning special permit. There's no parking provided, as we're within the transit zone here. As far as the 70 studio units, 60% are reserved for individuals exiting a New York City Department of Homeless Services shelter, and 40% would be affordable units to individuals earning up to 60% AMI. CAMBA will be the developer and the long-term service provider. And then quickly here, the site plan. I just want to highlight that in front of this project, we have, as I mentioned, Veterans Triangle, as well as the convergence of New Lots Avenue and Hegeman Avenue, forming a very wide, continuous open space directly in front of the project area. So this was certified in November 28th. It went out to the Community Board 16. They held a public hearing on December 20th and recommended approval with no conditions, and went to the borough president, held a public hearing January 9th, and also recommended approval with no conditions, and also provided several pages of comments, and all of that is in the package. Thank you.
Are you finished, Dan?
Yes. Take questions.
Thank you, Anthony. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. Knuckles.
Thank you. Anthony, I understand this is outside of the MIH requirements, but do these units, are they affordable in perpetuity?
Yes, these would be permanently affordable housing units.
No.
No, that's not right. Okay.
I think it'll be for HPD financing, but that's something that they can definitely talk about at the public hearing. Because they are filed directly at community facility before it's not subject to MIE. Yeah, I'm not sure what the financing term is, but HPD can speak to that when they're here at the public hearing on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Ms. Levitt.
Well, that actually gets at the question I have in my mind here. This is a special permit that is essentially doubling the floor area ratio that's allowed here. And it is for a community facility use, but let's face it, these are residences. I mean, legally, under the zoning resolution, it's not residential use. But it is residential use. And we have a provision in the MIH text that we just approved that said if you have a special permit that increases residential use, MIH applies. And we've had you're not going to know about this, Anthony, because luckily for you, you weren't around the last time we debated one of these, but this strikes me as another case where, I mean, it would be most unfortunate if in the future something happened with this operator. Let's hope it doesn't, because they know what they're doing with these kinds of facilities, and I think we have some assurance that this will indeed be very long-term affordable housing, but it could lend itself to some other market rate community facility use that wouldn't be very desirable. So,
They could certainly do that. They could certainly, I mean, that's the whole idea of community facility use, is that they it's a community facility, but they couldn't convert it to regular housing.
correct. But I guess what I'm getting at is a question about the term of affordability here, and,
No, I think it's
What-
it's a fair point to see what we can find out in terms of maximum affordability, and obviously, we want it to be as long as possible. And you recall that this issue in a different way came up with ZQA as well, because we were increasing for senior housing the height
That's right.
limits, and it was not for a lack of desire, but it was really because financing mechanisms really didn't permit for these kinds of facilities, or couldn't guarantee permanent affordable housing. So I think that really is a limitation here. And you're right that they could, if this went belly up, they could make this into some other kind of community facility, but they certainly couldn't make it into housing without coming back here, at least not at the FAR we're
Right.
permitting for community facility.
yeah, it could be a dorm, it could be maybe a hostel. Yeah, and we're stuck with a building that's twice as large as the underlying, I mean, the building's relatively permanent, so that's why we have to be careful.
Mr. Cantor?
Further to that discussion, there's a regularity here that's uncommon in housing, as opposed to dormitories or light facilities. My question, though, is, what is the proposed materials? Is that going to be air conditioned? And if so, what are the units?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. We can find out, and the applicant will be here on Wednesday. He can probably address that.
Does the applicant have a rendering that shows the surrounding area? That building is standing in a vacuum, and it's hard for me to see how it relates to the community.
We can see if they can provide one.
Anthony, who
at the
will
next
be here
meeting.
tomorrow? Will it be the applicant alone, HPD as well? or-
HPD will be here. I'm told they'll have a representative from CAMBA, as well as the architect.
But I don't know if the applicant or representatives are in the audience, but,
Jocelyn is.
They are.
so, you heard the questions.
What's in this for the city? Other than the fact that it's made up
Homeless housing, transitional supportive housing.
That's a big,
That's a big one.
it's pretty important right now.
I'm not questioning that. As you mentioned earlier, this is a two, we're doubling the size of the building. That's a good grant for the applicant. I mean, it's an equal increase for us.
Ms. Helena?
Just a couple thoughts here. I mean, obviously, Canva's a very experienced developer and nonprofit developer of affordable housing and service provider. I certainly have no concerns there, and I think they were the one one of the only shelters that the New York Times reviewed recently that was praised in the paper, which tells you a little something. I guess I totally understand the concern about the permanent affordability. I also understand why there's a belief it's not applicable in this case, based on the community facility use. I know that there's increasing stirrings among the advocacy community to look at disposition of city-owned land and use that as the trigger for permanent affordability. So, I guess this will just be one mention on the stop of that discussion, so that we don't leave ourselves later down the line with no city-owned land, with limited opportunities for increasing permanent affordability. One thing that I'll ask at the review session is whether or not that was something that CAMBA was open to in this discussion. I think there are a number of times when the potential owner is actually open to that, and given the mission-oriented nature of this developer, I would imagine that might be the case. Thanks.
Mr. Marin.
Anthony, first of all, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
My questions are a little bit pointed at the design of the building. So, taking a look at the section that they provided on page A017, we have a first floor at 11 foot 4 inches. That's it. And then we have what appears to be the sixth floor, that's correct, at 11 foot 4 inches. So my first question, and of course keeping in mind that we are doubling the size of doubling the FAR of this parcel, is there a reason why that sixth floor is at 11 foot 4 inches? It just seems that every other floor is at 9.4. Considering that these are studios, the higher you make a height in a studio, the smaller a studio appears when you have a higher ceiling. So that's one comment. The second comment is along those same lines. You have a first floor at 11 foot 4, which sort of fills in with the ZQA mantra of getting that first apartment off street level, but the slab in this instance appears to be at street level. So there seems to be no, from what I can see, and while I appreciate a higher first floor because it's more inviting, there's no sort of rhyme or reason as to why those two floors are 11 foot 4.
Yeah, and I think that the applicant and the architect can probably address that
I'm sure.
question. I don't know the answer.
Are they setback rules?
Well, the 11th floor is the 6th floor is a setback floor, but the first floor obviously is not.
They may be wanting it like it.
Thank you, Anthony.
Any other questions for Anthony? Really, questions to the applicant team. And through Anthony. So I assume the applicant team can address these questions over executive. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
Let's now go to item number 9, page 238, proposed acquisition of property for the continued use of the Friends of Crown Heights Child Care Center 29. It's Brooklyn pre-hearing item number 9, page 238, and our presenter is Samadi Naik.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The Administration for Children's Services and Citywide Administrative Services are seeking acquisition of an existing two-story building for continued operation of a child care center in Brooklyn's Community District A. The lease agreement for this site expired in October of 2015, and DCAS has negotiated a new lease agreement with a new 10-year contract attached to it, and they will lease the site upon the UDAAP approval. This application was certified by the department last October, and it is back for hearing. There were no questions or concerns at the time. The community board recommended approval with 27 votes in favor, none opposed or abstaining on December 8, 2016, and borough president voted approval on January 27. Are there any questions?
That was very efficient.
Yes?
You got the prize today for efficiency. Any questions? Mr. Napa?
Sanmati, I think you've done these before, so you should anticipate our usual questions about the condition of the facility. The pictures look like it's a happy space, but how would you characterize the condition of the space?
It was a
in general, Friends of Crown Heights centers are good, and this one is also a very good facility. It has like 20 staff members. There are up to 95 children between 2 to 4. It had a good feeling. It seemed run by good management, so everything seemed good. It was a good facility. And the building.
The condition of the,
Yes, it was also good. It was, yeah, there were no real issues. There was a minor, the roof tiles on the floor, on the rooftop they're slightly like raised, but it was covered under the scoping agreement, and everything seemed to be good.
okay.
Any other questions for someone? Public hearing on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Now let's go to item number 10, back from Community Board referral. We have a proposed authorization to facilitate a single parking space. St.
That may be
Patrick's,
controversial.
St. Patrick's Cathedral, and our presenter is Sarah Elmore, the Manhattan office. Item number 10, page 257.
Good afternoon, Chairman Weisbrod, Commissioners. This is an application by the trustees of St. Patrick's Cathedral requesting an authorization pursuant to section 13442 to allow one accessory parking space in an enclosed structure adjacent to the Cardinals residence within the St. Patrick's Cathedral complex located at 625 Fifth Avenue. The project site is located in the Special Midtown District and within Community District 5, Midtown Manhattan. The project site includes one entire block bounded by East 51st Street to the north, Madison Avenue to the east, East 50th Street to the south, and Fifth Avenue to the west. The Cathedral complex occupies the entire block and includes the St. Patrick's Cathedral, which occupies the majority of the block, the Cardinals residence at the southeast corner, and the rectory at the northeast corner. East 50th Street between Fifth Avenue and Madison Avenue is a one-way eastbound crosstown street with 3 lanes. The northernmost lane is generally designated for curbside commercial parking with a posted time limit. There are no curb cuts on the north side of the street, 2 curb cuts along the south side of the street, and there's an M50 bus stop located on the southeast side of East 50th Street, just east of Fifth Avenue. The applicant proposes to construct one single-story space parking facility with a secure vehicle entry to provide an enhanced level of security for the Cardinal as he enters and exits his car, and secure storage of his vehicle, which is currently garaged off-site. The proposed parking facility is located immediately west of the Cardinals' residence on the north side of East 50th Street, located right here. The exterior dimensions of the proposed facility are approximately 23 feet by 7 inches on the east-west frontage and 29 feet 7 inches on the north-south frontage. The exterior of the proposed parking facility will rise to a height of approximately 9 feet 10 inches. And the interior of the proposed parking facility will be 22 feet 11 inches by 21 feet 7 inches, resulting in approximately 494 square feet of parking zone surface area with a 7-foot clear height inside the facility. The selection of materials on the exterior of the one-story parking facility are those that are used elsewhere in the complex, including granite cladding that matches the existing retaining wall, bronze-clad doors, and the entry gate that matches the materials, details, and finish of the existing elements. The plantings proposed for the roofs of the structure would allow the entry to be seen as a continuation of the greenscape that extends throughout the complex. The New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission held a public hearing on an application for this work on December 15, 2015, and issued a certificate of appropriateness. An 11-foot length of the existing stone wall will be removed and replaced by 2 4-foot-high wrought iron gates that match the existing gates at the service entrance to the Cardinals' residence. The metal gates proposed will open into the property when entering or exiting the proposed facility. The proposed parking facility will be equipped with a turntable that will provide head-in, head-out operation and will obviate any need for the Cardinals' vehicle to back out of the parking facility. The adjacent vestibule and stair will provide direct access to the basement level of the Cardinals' residence through an existing below-grade areaway. To gain vehicular access to the secure entry from the street at the gates, opening into the terrace of the wall open inwards away from the sidewalk using remote control. The 7-foot 5-inch high bronze-clad 2-panel door folds vertically and will be programmed to open and close simultaneously with the gates. The proposed 12-foot wide curb cut is located on the north side of East 50th Street.
The applicant, the trustees of St. Patrick's Cathedral, is seeking an authorization pursuant to section 13442 to permit one accessory parking space in an enclosed structure adjacent to the Cardinals' residence on the St. Patrick's Cathedral complex. Section 1307B does not allow the addition of any new parking spaces in existing buildings that were developed with parking on an as-of-right basis. However, the City Planning Commission may, by authorization pursuant to section 13442, allow an off-street parking facility with a maximum capacity of 15 spaces in an existing building developed without parking. The requested authorization would allow the provision of one accessory residential parking space within the St. Patrick Cathedral complex for the exclusive use of the Cardinal. This application was referred to Community Board 5 on December 12th, and at the full board meeting on January 12th, the Community Board voted to recommend approval of this application with 31 in favor, 1 opposed, and 1 abstaining. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Sarah? Ms. Levin, okay, I know what you're going to say. Okay. No, probably not.
Ah, darn. This is a far cry from Staten Island, where we got one space for, 150 square feet, and here we get, one space for an entire city block in the cathedral. No, I'm just curious about the relationship between this process and DOB's permitting process, because I believe this garage is largely constructed. I was by there a while back, and there's work going on.
I know
So-
that there's other work going on with the actual building itself. I can double check, but to my knowledge, work has not begun on the actual facility, but I can confirm.
It kind of looked, there was a concentration of activity at this particular location, so. But theoretically, though, this authorization is necessary to begin work?
Well, I mean, I guess from what I understand, they would be able to begin construction. I mean, if anything, it would have to be set as, not as a parking facility, because you need the authorization for the actual parking
For the
facility.
car to show up, yeah.
But if maybe, I suppose if it was called storage or
Got
something,
it, okay, maybe that's
I
what
would
they're-
assume that
yeah.
would be.
I mean,
Okay.
it needs presumably time to test it.
We have the power to absolve.
We don't have to.
I think you might, Joe.
Any other questions? Okay, so,
Is that hydrant gonna have to be moved?
I'm sorry?
Will the hydrant have to be moved?
The hydrant, does it have to be built?
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know, but I can check.
This will be scheduled for a vote. And, I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question, Ms. Cantor?
The hydrant.
Oh, the hydrant.
There are curb cuts in the back side of the block, and you have to make a left.
We'll find out. We'll find out and get you an answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Commissioners, before we go to the future votes, we have one added item, which involves Franklin Avenue, which propose zoning map amendment and text amendment that include affordable housing in Community District 9 in Brooklyn, and our presenter is Reade Street.
Mysterious Franklin Avenue
Three's a charm.
application comes before us. Three?
application by Cornell Realty Management for a zoning map amendment to create the project area, to rezone the project area from R6A with a C13 overlay, and R8A to R8X and R8X with a C24 overlay, as well as a zoning text amendment to establish the rezoning area as a mandatory inclusionary housing area to facilitate the development of 518 units of housing, including 140 affordable units and 15,000 square feet of retail at 2 sites, 40 Crown Street and 931 Carroll Street in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, Community District 9. The project is located in central Brooklyn on the western edge of Crown Heights, Brooklyn CD9, just east of Prospect Park. The project area is generally bounded by Franklin Avenue to the east, Montgomery Street to the south, a line 300 feet west of and parallel to Franklin Avenue on the west, and a center line between Carroll and President Street to the north. The S shuttle train runs along the western boundary of the study area. The project area is 2.5 blocks long and is approximately 300 feet wide. The project area was rezoned in 1991 by the Department of City Planning as part of a 13-block rezoning bounded by Eastern Parkway, Washington Avenue, Sullivan Place, and a line 100 feet east of Franklin Avenue. The project area was rezoned from R6C13 and R8 districts to R6A-C13 and R8A districts to encourage mid-rise contextual buildings. R6A is a medium-density contextual district with a maximum FAR of 3.0 or 3.6 when mapped within an inclusionary housing designated area. Buildings in R6A districts can reach a maximum height of 70 feet or 75 feet with a qualifying ground floor of at least 13 feet. R8A is a contextual district with a maximum FAR of 6.02 or 7.2 when mapped within a mandatory inclusionary housing area. Buildings in R8A districts can reach a maximum height of 120 feet or 125 feet with qualifying ground floors of at least 13 feet. The surrounding area is characterized by a mix of land uses, including multifamily residential buildings, public facilities and institutions, mixed residential and commercial buildings, industrial uses, and vacant lots. There are high-rise developments nearby, including Tivoli Towers, a 33-story residential tower in the project area, and Ebbets Field, a complex of 7 25-story buildings, 1 block east of the project area. Mixed-use buildings with ground floor retail are concentrated north of the project site on Franklin Avenue, and low-scale commercial industrial uses, including a spice import warehouse, are located adjacent and south of the project area. The typical built form in the surrounding area consists of 2-story attached row houses, 4 to 6-story multifamily residential buildings, and 2 to 4-story mixed-use buildings with ground floor retail. There are several public facilities and institutions located in the surrounding area. Medgar Evers College campus is located east of the project on Bedford between Crown and Montgomery. The Brooklyn Botanic Gardens and Brooklyn Museum are located 1 block west of the project on Washington Avenue. The Bedford Union Armory is northeast of the project at Bedford and Union. And there are also 3 high schools, the Brooklyn School for Music and Theater, the High School for Global Citizenship, and Clara Barton High School, 1 block west of the project on Classen Avenue. The project area is well served by transit, including the Franklin Avenue subway station on the 2, 3, 4, and 5 trains, and the Botanic Garden station on the S shuttle train, all 2 blocks north of the project area on Eastern Parkway. The project area is also served by the B48 bus line that runs southbound along Franklin Avenue and northbound along Washington and Classen Avenues. The project area consists of Block 1188, the northern half block, Block 1189, the middle block front, and Block 1190, the southern block front. Block 1188 is currently zoned R6A-C13 and includes residential and commercial uses such as a discount store, a pharmacy, and a laundromat. Block 1189 is currently zoned R8A and includes the high-rise Tivoli Towers development and the New York Police Department Transit District 32 building. Block 1190 is zoned R6A and is currently vacant. Proposed development sites include 931 Carroll Street, an approximately 18,000 square foot interior lot on Carroll Street directly west of Franklin Avenue, and 40 Crown Street, an approximately 56,000 square foot irregularly shaped lot that encompasses the entire block front of Franklin Avenue between Crown and Montgomery Streets. 931 Carroll Street was improved with a vacant single-story building that was formerly used for storage of motor vehicles and has recently been demolished. As you can see in the photos, this dead-end portion of Carroll Street abuts the S shuttle train. 40 Crown Street is currently vacant and previously contained a single-story building used as an industrial laundry, as you can see in the bottom right-hand photo. Cornell is proposing two developments, one at 931 Carroll Street and the other at 40 Crown Street. Together, the two developments will include approximately 518 units of housing, including 140 affordable units, 15,000 square feet of retail, and 151 parking spaces, at a total of 7.2 FAR. 931 Carroll Street will include a 16-story residential building containing approximately 128 dwelling units, 35 of which will be affordable, and 37 off-street parking spaces. 40 Crown Street will be a 16-story residential building and with approximately 390 units, 105 of which will be affordable, 15,000 square feet of ground floor retail fronting Franklin Avenue, and 114 off-street parking spaces. The project will utilize mandatory inclusionary housing option 1, which requires that an amount of floor area equivalent to 25% of the residential floor area within the development be affordable to households at an average of 60% AMI, with at least 10% at or below 40% AMI. This is a view from the west, and the next slide is a view from the east. The actions necessary to facilitate the project include a zoning map amendment to rezone the project area from R6A, R6A with a C13 overlay, and R8A to R8X and R8X with a C24 overlay. These districts would be mapped along the western side of Franklin Avenue between President and Montgomery Streets to facilitate mixed-use residential and commercial development. R8X is a contextual residential district that allows residential and community facility uses at an FAR of 6.02 and a maximum building height of 150 feet or 15 stories. When mapped within a mandatory inclusionary housing area, the maximum FAR is 7.2 and the maximum building height is 170 feet or 175 feet for buildings with qualifying ground floors of at least 13 feet. The project is in the transit zone, and accessory parking is required for 40% of all dwelling units above 80% of the area median income. The proposed zoning will bring the 315-foot tall Tivoli Towers into greater compliance. The second action includes a zoning text amendment to create Map 1 for Brooklyn Community District 9 in Appendix F of the zoning resolution to designate a new mandatory inclusionary housing area coterminous with the project area. The applicant is proposing MIH Option 1, which will require 25% of the residential floor area to be affordable to households at an average of 60% AMI, with at least 10% at or below 40% AMI.
Thank you. Questions for three? Hearing none.
Okay.
So Commissioners, on Wednesday, staff have prepared favorable resolutions for the following. We have the Sunset Park Library, 183, 195 Broadway Building, St. Barbara's Roman Catholic Church, 34 Howard Street, the Leroy, the Robeson, and the Frederick, Sullivan Thompson Historic District, Excelsior Steam Power Company Building, Bergdorf Goodman, 412 East 85th Street House, Young Men's Christian Association Building, Lowe's 175th Street Theater, the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene Distribution Center, the Protestant Reformed Dutch Church, South Shore Coastal Storm Risk Management Phase 1, Landmark Catellu Taylor House, and the Brougham Cottage in Staten Island. Great. So moving on to February the 22nd, we have the proposed Rose Castle rezoning. You'll note that the applicant submitted a letter asking for additional time to respond to your concerns.
Yeah, let me just say, our understanding is that the applicant is doing full work and research on why it needs the 150, the workforce option. This will be discussed on the 22nd when I will
you, Mr. Chairman. On February 22nd, we will have the Red Hook Initiative, favorable consideration. Caton Flats, you received a letter from the applicant with response to this project, so I'm going to ask Jonah to just come up and summarize the contents of that letter, please.
Just so you know, so follow up to the public hearing held on January 16th. The applicants prepared a memo responding to a variety of questions raised by members of the commission with further information on how the market will be managed, programmed, and operated, as well as its relationship to the proposed retail uses within the development and businesses along Flatbush Avenue. Urbane Development, the community development partner, has also provided more information about their role in working with the vendors and as far as outreach and their own analysis of the market. The team has also prepared information about parking, the role of SBS as a city agency, and then also some information about the affordability component. So I can further summarize it, but I'm also available to answer any questions or relay questions to the applicant team. Thank you.
Any questions on, okay? Hearing none?
Okay, thanks.
And then last but not least, we have the West 23rd Street text amendment, which is a text amendment proposed to transfer floor area across zoning lot boundaries. Staff will be preparing a favorable report. Fabulous.
So any further,
Mr. Chairman, we have one more piece of business, if you will just indulge us for a second. We have a special meeting in the matter of a favorable resolution by the City Planning Commission and the staff of the Department of City Planning regarding Carl Weisbrod. Whereas,
this has to go to a pre-hearing.
Indeed. Whereas the chairman has tirelessly worked as a man of principles and a proponent of holistic neighborhood planning, including being a champion of affordable housing, visionary in keeping New York City at the forefront of the global economy, leader in strengthening the city's resilience against storms and other forces, and shown by example his exemplary ability as a team builder in creating an environment of inclusiveness for all New Yorkers, and by recognizing the interrelationship of his people within the broader region in which we live, all with wit, humor, and good cheer throughout his tenure as chairman. Therefore, be it resolved that the City Planning Commission and Department of City Planning staff fondly wish you the very best in all of your endeavors. For a favorable resolution, Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Roll call, please.
Well, let me say briefly, that Carl Weisbrod has been a friend and colleague for more than 25 years. We met at the advent of the Hegeman administration, and throughout Carl's career, which preceded the Hegeman administration considerably, but you don't mind my saying. But I think there are a few people in the city that have had the impact on making this extraordinary place more livable than Carl Weisbrod in various capacities. And I am less than happy to see him depart, but if history is any lesson, I think our paths will continue to cross. And he will be around to continue his efforts to make this more livable place. But I think this has been as impactful a 3 years at City Planning as anyone has seen, and I am proud to have been a part of it. And congratulations. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Commissioner Besser votes yes in absentia.
The only time
Commissioner-
that's ever been possible.
Commissioner Cantor.
It's, there's a song, it's tough to see you go. It's tough to see you go. It's, I've sat through several chairs, and I can honestly say with delight, it's been a pleasure with you. You have the ability to express your concerns to the applicant as well as to the commission as a whole in a way that only if the person who's being, only if the person to whom you are speaking is stone deaf, they should understand. And finally, you got a wit and a humor about you that really makes these days, when they run long especially, makes these days feel very much shorter. So once again, as I said to you, I'm sad for us and glad for you.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Vote yes.
I gotta think about it. Yes.
Thank you. Well, like the vice chairman, our paths have crossed professionally for 25 years. So this opportunity, I've been very grateful for, and the privilege of being able to serve with you and to work with you again so closely as we have in the past on our very critical neighborhoods throughout the city. I can tell you that, at least for me, but I think for the whole city, your manner and your leadership will certainly be missed immensely. But I am anxious to follow your next chapter and also to continue to be your friend and to have the friendship that we've had for such a long time and to continue to experience that. So with that said, I bittersweetly vote yes, and I wish you the best, good health and happiness and continued success always, Carl.
Commissioner De La Uz.
I join my colleagues in saying how deeply honored it has been for me to serve on this commission with you as chair. I think we've all benefited immensely from your commitment to the city and your deep knowledge of its institutions. I think more than anything, though, that I've been struck just by your decency as a person, that you are able to convey in so many different ways, whether it's how you handle a public hearing, as my colleague said, how you handle points of tension that have come up over the last several years and some tough conversations, and how you've, I think, always had us focus on the greater ideals and the greater values that we're all here to focus on. And so I think we've all been very, very fortunate, and I certainly have, since I haven't known you for 25 years and worked with you in many different capacities. But I wish you well with lots of health and lots of happiness, and with that, I vote yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
I was gonna write a poem. I actually started it. Carl, roses are red, violets are blue. Without you as our leader, what will we do? So, you came in with big shoes to fill, and you turned them into boots. Raising the bar for your successor, it has been an honor and a pleasure to serve with you, and I hope our paths do cross again. You will be missed, and of course, I wish you much success in all your endeavors, and I will finish that poem at your dinner. And with that, I vote yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Carl, hi. You've been called a real estate veteran, a understated force, and have served many positions for 5 different mayors now. And you've also spent time in the private sector. That experience has served you well and has served the city well. As one developer said after a tough negotiation, Carl was tough but fair and had the creativity to bend the deal structure to meet the administration's priorities in a way that worked for the overall project, ended up being mutually beneficial.
That's what you've done every day in your many positions and here at City Planning. And I vote yes, and pleased and honored to serve with you. Thank you.
Commissioner Efron.
I would like to associate myself with all of the remarks stated and just add that, well, I've had the pleasure of working with Carl for half of my life and my entire professional life. There's one aspect we've neglected to mention, which is that Carl's tireless promotion and leadership of professional women is something that we really all have benefited from, and the likes of which have never been seen and I fear will never be seen again. So we thank you for that, and we also thank you for making sure that every voice is heard, every person who stands up there is heard with sincerity, and when at the end of the day, that is really what we're here to do, and thank you for leading the way on that too. And with that, I say yes.
Commissioner Knight.
As the newest member of the City Planning Commission, I consider it an honor and a privilege to have served under your leadership. I salute your career as a distinguished and dedicated public servant. I hadn't had the opportunity to work with you before this time, but I'm certainly sure glad that I have now. I was just out at Governor's Island, and our loss is their gain, so I wish you very much happiness and wellness in the future. And I vote yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Well, as Commissioner Dweck has pointed out, there is poetry here. There's poetry in Carl's long government career, beginning and ending on 42nd Street, from the tawdry Times Square of the Lindsay and Koch administrations to the rebirth of East Midtown in the de Blasio administration. And there's poetry in Carl, too, who is almost certainly the only chair to have invoked James Joyce in connection with the land use matter.
Was that Molly Bloom?
Yeah, we won't go into what that soliloquy was all about.
We're happy to have her.
Thank you for doing this for so long and so well. You've lifted far more than affordability requirements, capital investments in neighborhoods, interagency collaboration, and the height of ground floor retail spaces. You've lifted us all. Thank you. I vote yes.
Commissioner Marin.
So I had the opportunity of meeting Carl 25 years ago as well, except I didn't have the opportunity to work with him or the privilege. I worked at the Urban Development Corporation, and Carl was working on the redevelopment of 42nd Street. And I was not really into the department that I was in. I'll leave that out for a minute, but I would sneak to the floor where Carl was on because I was just so impressed with his leadership and his staff, that everyone was just so together and so pointed in their mission. And so 25 years pass and the opportunity prevails itself to have Carl as our leader, and it's been a privilege, a really immense privilege to serve under you. It's been a great learning experience, and the friendship is just something that we take away, and I say we because we all have, at the end of the day, and we all have expressed our sentiments. We take it away very seriously, and we know that, as Fred said, we'll see you again sometime. We know that we're all dedicated public servants, and we really appreciate the work you've done. You're a mensch. I remember when I was called a mensch, I said, what the hell is that? But now knowing the definition, you are the true epitome of being a mensch, and I really appreciate having served under you.
A yes vote?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
There's very little that I can add to this. I have really, it's meant a lot to me to serve under you. I think I've always admired you and your work, and this has been such an honor. So that's really all I have to add. And, you know, I do have to say what Cheryl echoed. I appreciate, like many of those of us who have come up during your time, your advocacy of the people around you and the people that you believe in, and it's really meant a lot. So thank you. I vote yes.
I abstain. You know, I'm really surprised by this, and But, so I'm not going to be as eloquent as any of you, but I just want to say that for me, these past 3 years working with all of you have been just about the most happiest professional year of my life. And I really, I just cherish my working relationship with all of you in the commission, and obviously the entire staff at City Planning, which is just an extraordinary group of smart, dedicated people. It's just been, for me, such a joy to work with them. I do want to say about the commission itself that I have had the opportunity to chair many different bodies. And even though the planning commission is unique because there are several different appointing authorities here, and so everyone certainly comes to this commission with a perspective and not always 100% agreement on everything. And yet, this has been, I think for all of us, but certainly for me, an extraordinarily collegial group of individuals. Each one of you, even if there are differences, and even if there are disagreements, and as Michelle said, there have been times when there have been disagreements, and there have been different perspectives on things, but all of those have been aired in such an respectful and collegial and intelligent way, on the merits without in any way ever getting into the personal. And that's really a rare thing for a body of this sort. And it's just a tribute to, really, to all of you, because you really as individuals and as a group, I think have assured that that's been the case. And I spent a lot of time, obviously, in a city which I truly love. It's a unique place. And it's unique, it's so important to recognize, especially right now, the values of the city. The fact that we have been founded on, as a city, and just always part of our DNA as a city that welcomes people from all over, that prides itself on diversity, that believes in entrepreneurial spirit, and that ultimately and very, very, very deeply has such a deep commitment to social justice. And in the times we're in, those values are so important, and they're really the values that we all hope as a society that are everlasting, really, that are immortal values, and that's what the city represents, and what all of you, I know, represent. So even when we have, from time to time, issues that are tough and that we try to work out and not always see exactly the same way, I do know that we do all start with that same set of values, and that's what makes working with all of you such a joy, pleasure, and so deeply, deeply satisfying. So I'm really touched by this, and I just thank you all. Really, thank you. I did want to say one final thing, which is a
Thank you.